Gentlemen, I call the meeting to order. It is 6 o'clock. It's always a pleasure to see so many people in the gallery. It seems like last year we had nobody but us, so it's always nice to have people with us, and welcome to everybody. I'd like to remind everybody to please silence all your electronic devices, and if you would, please stand and join us in the invocation by the Vice Mayor.
Dear Father, on this annual recollection of the Pearl Harbor tragedy, we pray for blessings and guidance. Enable us to reflect clearly and conscientiously upon our priceless heritage. Let us be determined to guard and preserve it through all trials and difficulties. Help us to be worthy of the lofty ideals for which so many courageous men and women sacrificed so much, both in the battlefields and at home. May this blessed haven ever be a citadel of justice, freedom, and brotherhood. We recognize and appreciate your guidance as we do our work tonight for all who live, work, and play in our little piece of this big world, Temple Terrace. And all God's people said, amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Vice Mayor. So the first order of business today is kind of a bittersweet one. We're going to say a temporary goodbye to one of our residents. Dr. Linkus, would you like to approach the podium, please? So I'll read from the formal script here in just a moment, but I have to tell you that this is Dr. Linkus from USF, who has been our appointed representative to the Hillsborough County City-County Planning Commission for a year or so now. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, we're saying a temporary goodbye to her because she is going on quite an adventure. But she will be back. She is a Temple Terrace resident, and we're very proud of her, so I invited her to come here tonight so that we could acknowledge her service to the city and wish her well and look forward to her speedy return. So Dr. Evangeline, or as most of us call her Van, Dr. Linkus, is a program director for and an associate professor in the Master of Urban and Regional Planning program at the University of South Florida. She's also served, as I said, as the City of Temple Terrace's representative to the Hillsborough County City-County Planning Commission since February of 2020. Dr. Linkus was recently awarded a Fulbright U.S. Scholar Award to teach and conduct research at, and I'm sure I'm going to mess this up, is it Tbilisi?
Tbilisi. Yeah.
Tbilisi State University in Tbilisi, which is the capital city of the Republic of Georgia. Not Atlanta, Russia. And she'll be in Tbilisi from January through May of 2022, working on projects relating to managing growth, preserving historic neighborhoods, and developing community engagement institutions for planning. Dr. Linkus studies the fiscal, legal, and institutional instruments and frameworks used to rationalize management of land resources in rapid growth area. She is has several publications out there. She's very highly regarded in her field. We are very fortunate to have her as a resident of our city and to have had her as our appointee to the Planning Commission. We will miss her greatly, although we look forward to your return, and hope you will come and visit with us and give us a presentation about what you did over there. And we are currently advertising for her replacement on the Planning Commission, although I'm hopeful that we get one of her esteemed colleagues from USF to fill her shoes for the time being. So I'd like to read the certificate of recognition. It says, in recognition of her outstanding service to the citizens of Temple Terrace on the Hillsborough County City-County Planning Commission, Dr. Linkus is the program director and associate professor of urban and regional planning at USF. She's been awarded a Fulbright scholarship and will be going to Georgia for 6 months to work on a project. The Fulbright program is one of several United States cultural exchange programs with the goal of improving intercultural relations, cultural diplomacy, and intercultural competence between the American people of the United States and other countries through the exchange of persons, knowledge, and skills. Via the program, competitively selected American citizens may receive scholarships or grants to study, conduct research, teach, or exercise their talents abroad. The program was founded by United States Senator J. William Fulbright in 1946 and is considered to be one of the most widely recognized and prestigious scholarships in the world. And that is dated today from myself and all of my colleagues on the council. Dr. Linkus, would you like to say a few words?
Just that it's my honor and pleasure to serve Temple Terrace. I wouldn't live anywhere else in this region, and I do look forward to coming back and connecting the USF School of Public Affairs, where Councilmember Abel is a student, and where so many people in our community are involved. So we hope to continue to stay involved in serving Temple Terrace and bringing planning resources to the community, and it's been my pleasure to serve. Thank you so much.
Good, thank you. We'll have work for you when you return.
Right. Thank you.
Good luck.
Next item of business is the consideration of minutes from the previous meeting of November 16th.
Move to approve.
Second?
Motion and a second. Are there any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The minutes are approved. Thank you. Next item are persons wishing to be heard on items not listed on the agenda or items on the consent agenda. There is a 3-minute time limit imposed on all comments from the public. We do ask that speakers come to the podium, state their name and city of residence prior to making their comments. During public comment on items not on the agenda, we like to assure the public that the city manager, elected officials, and the directors in the audience all take your comments very seriously, and we do follow up on them. We do have a rule that we have a 30-minute time limit for public comment at this point in the meeting. If speakers wish to exceed that, we pause at the 30-minute mark, and then we resume public comment at the end of the meeting, and that's to allow the business of the meeting to proceed. So are there members of the public? Everything I have is for a particular agenda item. Are there members of the public who wish to address the council? There is one? Oh, I see. Okay, yes. Ms. Tumbleson, welcome. Good evening.
Mayor, council, I appreciate y'all being here. I am interested in this 135 report that keeps mentioning. I would like to receive a copy, or maybe it can be put in the minutes or sent out by our clerk, to people that want to see it. We need more information about the 135 report that was brought up, not only regarding the CRA, but in Temple Terrace. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other members of the public who wish to address the council? Okay, all documents that we mentioned, ladies and gentlemen, are public record, and all of our documents, with few exceptions, can be obtained through the clerk's office by making a public records request. So unless they fit into one of the narrow legal exceptions, everything we have is open to the public. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda, and we have a resolution approving the purchase of a 2022 Ford F-250 Super Duty Super Cab pickup truck. City Manager Stevenson will explain the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've got one item on consent this evening. Before council is a resolution approving the purchase of a 2022 Ford 250 pickup truck for our Public Works Department from Duval Ford in the amount of $47,492. This purchase is under the Florida Sheriff's Association contract FSA 20-VEL 28.0. purchase of this vehicle will be paid out of account 410-1921-533.64-12. Funds for this purchase are allocated in fiscal year 2022 budget. Thank you.
Good. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second. Motion and a second. All those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Consent agenda is approved. Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Next item is the second public hearing and second reading of Ordinance 1514, adopting the Comprehensive Plan Amendment CPA 21-02. I'll open the public hearing. Mark Hudson, Executive Planner from the Hillsborough County Planning Commission, will provide a brief explanation. Welcome, Mr. Hudson.
Good evening, Mark Hudson, Planning Commission staff. Glad to be here. This is a presentation I gave to you a couple months ago, and I'll go through it just quickly again, just to refresh your memory. If I could have the PowerPoint. This plan amendment revolves around the development of a property rights element for the city of Temple Terrace. The Planning Commission has been working on this for some months, not only for Temple Terrace, but all 4 jurisdictions in Hillsborough County. A little bit of background. The property rights element is required based on some action this legislative session, particularly House Bill 59, which requires this element to be developed for all jurisdictions within the state of Florida. And basically, it is designed to ensure that property rights are considered in the local decision-making processes of all those jurisdictions, of course, including Temple Terrace. There are some penalties if the jurisdiction does not take action. In particular, other plan amendments that are being processed, either map amendments or text amendments that were initiated after July 1st of this year, could not proceed until this action is taken on the property rights element. This property rights element is rather thin. It doesn't have a lot to it. It has a single goal, a single objective, and a single policy. The goal reads, as you can see on the screen in front of you, it acknowledges the property rights of the community to ensure their consideration within local decision-making processes of Temple Terrace, and the objective relates to that as well, respect to private property rights in the city of Temple Terrace. And I'll leave this up on the screen for a few moments, but this is the language that comes right out of House Bill 59 and required to be part of that, and this is the single policy in this element that ensures the compliance with this legislative action that was taken just this last session. The Planning Commission reviewed this document on August 24th, and they did find it consistent with the Temple Terrace Comprehensive Plan. We brought this and presented this to you on September 21st, with the action being to transmit this to the Department of Economic Opportunity for their review and comment. We did do that, and DEO had no comments or concerns and instructed us to move forward. So we're back here this evening to get your final action for adoption. I will say before I go on, just because memory serves, as I mentioned, we're doing this for all 4 jurisdictions. Plant City adopted theirs some time ago, very similar to the one that's being proposed for Temple Terrace. On Thursday, the Hillsborough County will be considering theirs, and the City of Tampa will be considering theirs after the holidays in the month of January. We do feel this is consistent, as I already noted, with the Imagine 2040 Temple Terrace Comprehensive Plan. In particular, your goals 1 through 8 in your future land use element. And particularly, we feel that all those goals that the city has set for itself, this actual new element will not impede their achievement. As already noted, House Bill 59 that was signed by Governor DeSantis, we feel that this meets the intent of that legislation and meets those requirements set forth. We did distribute this for agency and jurisdictional comments, which we received none. And with that, we recommend City Council adopt an ordinance approving TTCPA 21-02, creating a Temple Terrace property rights element. Mayor, that concludes my presentation, and I stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hudson. Are there members of the public who wish to comment on this item? Seeing none, council members, any questions for Mr. Hudson? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and ask the clerk to read the title of the ordinance.
An ordinance of the City of Temple Terrace, Florida, amending the text of the Imagine 2040 Temple Terrace Comprehensive Plan by creating a property rights element in accordance with the adoption of House Bill 59 by the Florida House of Representatives, providing severability and effective date and repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict herewith.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Is there a motion to approve ordinance 1514 on second reading?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay.
We are eager to get this one passed.
Motion.
Is there any
passed.
discussion on the motion? Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No nays. The ordinance is adopted on second reading. Thank you, Mr. Hudson. Next item is a resolution adopting updated comprehensive plan amendment procedures manual for the cities of Tampa, Temple Terrace, and Plant City. Once again, Mark Hudson, Executive Planner from the Planning Commission, will explain.
Again, Mark Hudson, Planning Commission staff. This relates to the procedures manual of how we process plan amendments for the city of Temple Terrace. And I'll go ahead and begin by giving you a little bit of background. Our staff went through this process back in January of 2020. In particular, we went through the document, clarified language, streamlined processes, and also we separated the procedures manual that at one time addressed all 4 jurisdictions of Hillsborough County to separate Hillsborough County with the municipalities. So now there is a procedures manual that is just relating to Plant City, Temple Terrace, and the city of Tampa. We completed that process, and you did adopt that new procedures manual, which we've been operating under since that time. But like the last item, there was some legislation this last session that required us to re-review the procedures manual to ensure that we are in compliance with state statute. In particular, it was due to House Bill 487. And we went through the document and updated the processes accordingly, and I'll go through that in a moment. This procedures manual must be adopted by all 3 jurisdictions that are now part of it: Tampa, Plant City, and Temple Terrace. We have been to Plant City and Plant City and Tampa already. They have taken that action, so with your positive action tonight, the procedures manual would be fully implemented. We did have this document reviewed by not only your legal staff and also your community development department. So what are the changes in this? Of course, they weren't quite as extensive as last time when we went through this in 2020. But the main thing is the state has redefined what is considered a small-scale plan amendment. Currently, it was 10, well, in the past it was 10 acres, and they increased that to 50 acres. So if you recall, for small-scale plan amendments, we have a single public hearing, but when they're over a certain threshold, which used to be 10 and now it's 50, we have the added step of transmitting those to the state, particularly the Department of Economic Opportunities, to receive their comment before you take final action. With this change, that process would instead happen when they're over 50 acres in size, as opposed to historically where that has been 10 acres in size. We also removed the provision that allows some small-scale plan amendments to be submitted at any time, predominantly because we stagger our plan amendments to share resources, to process them in a timely manner. And when there's only 1 or 2 small-scale plan amendments, sometimes there's an opportunity to insert one out of cycle, as we call it. But in this case, based on our past research of past plan amendments, the vast majority of plan amendments now will be small scale, as most of the plan amendments that we process for the city of Temple Terrace and other jurisdictions tend to be under 50 acres. We also clarified language on the number of parcels that can be included in a plan amendment. It's not necessarily just 1 parcel, but multiple parcels that are contiguous can become part of a single plan amendment. This has not occurred in Temple Terrace, but in some other jurisdictions where applicants had purposely misnoticed or did not pay their advertising fees to garner a continuance. If that happens multiple times, now that will be considered, we will consider that withdrawn if they misnotice or do not pay their legal advertisement fees at the required time multiple times. And the last one doesn't really particularly affect Temple Terrace that much, but it relates to modifications to the urban service area boundary or other overlay boundaries, and requires those to be separate plan amendments for land use. You can't combine those with a land use change as well. that affects particularly Hillsborough County. With that, the Planning Commission recommends that the proposed Comprehensive Plan Procedures Manual for the cities of Tampa, Temple Terrace, and Plant City be adopted by Temple Terrace City Council. Mayor, that concludes my presentation, and I stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hudson. Are there members of the public who wish to comment on this item? Seeing none, council member questions? Questions for Mr. Hudson? Seeing none, is there a motion to adopt the updated Comprehensive Plan Amendment Procedures Manual?
I move to approve.
Oh,
I second it.
a motion by Councilmember Abel, second by Vice Mayor Donahue. Any discussion of the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No nays. The resolution is adopted. Thank you, Mr. Hudson. Next order of business is a resolution approving a task work order for the Wastewater Master Plan Phase 2. Troy Tinch, the Director of Public Works Utilities, will explain. Welcome, Mr. Tinch.
Good evening, everyone. How are you?
Good.
Roy Tinch, Public Works Utilities Director. I'm here this evening to seek approval to fund Phase 2 of the Wastewater Master Plan. As you'll recall, back in February of this year, I brought forward Phase 1 of the Wastewater Master Plan. And at that time, you guys unanimously accepted Phase 1. So now we're moving into Phase 2. So under Phase 1, we looked at all of our lift stations. We did assessments for all 30 of our lift stations within the city. We developed a 5-year CIP for the replacement of those lift stations. And we also introduced a hydrologic model for our wastewater system. So what can we look forward out of Phase 2? We'll be doing a general assessment of our collection system. We'll also be looking at I&I, that inflow and infiltration I've spoken about in the past, where you have pipes that are older, potentially leaking, and the gravity system, so it allows water to flow in. Of course, we send that water on down to the city of Tampa for treatment, so that does cost us money. So we'll be doing an assessment of that, trying to find out where the locations of our highest rates of inflow and infiltration, or I&I, are, and address those issues. In addition, we will be looking at setting up asset management, taking a look at what we currently do for our asset management, making sure that it meets best management practices for those efforts. In addition, we'll be also setting up on-call services for a contractor to come in and do selective work, like manhole rehabilitation and lining, ARV, air release valve replacement, gravity sewer point repairs, as well as CCTV inspection and smoke testing, and also setting up a lining contract. So what that will allow us to do is much like what we just recently did with our Flatworks contract and with our asphalt contract. We'll have several contractors available. We can simply dole out that work efforts to the contracts that we have selected, and then get those efforts moving quite quickly. Kind of helps in the whole step, eliminates the process of having to advertise for all of the projects that we look to do. So it will be something to be much more rapid. Also allow us to do some of the smaller point repairs without having to bring it forward. In addition, we'll also be developing a 5-year capital improvement program for our gravity and our force main systems. And finally, and most importantly, I think we're going to be looking at a revenue sufficiency analysis. And this is something, again, that we spoke about under Phase 1. We began that process. Now we're going to wrap it all up once we have an idea what we're looking at for our lining projects, for some of our other capital improvement projects. So we want to look at our revenue, make sure it's sufficient to carry forward with a lot of the proposed work efforts that we're looking at in the future. So that's something that we'll be working with Stantec, which is a sub to Kimley Horn on this project. And that will likely come forward hopefully by middle of next year. And I would like to present that when it's finalized. It will be before the finalization of Phase 2, but it will then allow us to kind of look at budgeting as we roll into FY23. So I think it'd be important for us to look at those numbers and look at that data at that time. So that said, staff recommends the City Council approve the expenditure of $199,718 for services to complete Phase 2 of the Wastewater Master Plan. The proposed work will be authorized as a task work order under the existing General Professional Services Agreement between the City and Kimley Horn. Funding for this effort has been budgeted in the Water and Sewer Renewal and Replacement Fund with an account number 430-1931-535.31-99. I will stand for questions if any.
Good, thank you, Mr. Tinch. Are there members of the public who wish to comment on this item? Welcome, sir.
Right, Kawaja at 10911 Montrose Avenue. I just had one question. Is there any septic areas within the city, and is there any plans in the future to eliminate all septics?
Very good.
Thank you.
So to address that question, there are a few minor areas within the city, most notably up in Pleasant Terrace, that is within the city's limits. However, it's not within our service area. Pleasant Terrace is served by the city of Tampa, so they provide water, and then most of those residents are on septic. So the city of Tampa would likely implement something to address those. I believe we may also have some outlying properties out towards I-75 that are also on septic and that do receive water from the city of Temple Terrace. So we will be ultimately looking to expand our services to add those into our collection system.
Thank you. Are there other members of the public who wish to comment? Seeing none, council member questions? Councilmember Schistler.
Yeah, Troy, a good presentation, thank you. There's a good supporting documents. But going back to tying this in with phase one,
Yes, sir.
will we eventually, this council or the next council, get a status report on where we stand with both phases on a regular basis? Or are we gonna, I mean, because, we have to go back and look at the book to see what was on phase one. I know you gave us a Gantt chart a couple of weeks ago.
Yes.
Is phase two, we'll go into that chart and we'll get regular updates
That is correct.
so that we know
Phase-
what the status of it is.
Yes. Phase two will also enter into the Gantt chart. And basically what that is doing is tracking that 5-year plan. So we have all of our lift stations on there where we will be adding then lining projects as well as potential point repairs for some of our gravity sewer systems, and also looking at some of our larger force mains for replacement. And that will also be tracked, and we will be pushing that forward, potentially even faster with the ARPA funds.
Follow-up question, and I&I has always been a special interest to me because we pay for it, and we didn't do anything to get it. With the existing lining program that we have, is that completed?
No, it is not completed.
Okay.
And I think the lining program will likely be a 10-year or longer program because of the extensive nature of the I&I. So it depends on how well we fund that, how robustly we fund that program. Right now, I think we're pushing about $200,000 a year. We would likely try to push that up a little bit over the next 10 years to try and address those issues.
Well, will that be handled under the tasking portion of phase two?
Yes, it would be there. As a matter of fact, part of what Kimley Horn is going to do is they're going to help us establish that program. So that we'll have a defined 5-year plan, and then we'll also have the contractors that will be able to go out and actually do that effort.
Because that's a black hole for us. So we
Absolutely.
can't, we're just spending.
Several $100,000 a year.
We can't stop it, so.
Yes.
Okay, but we'll get a status update as to where the existing INA's lining project
Absolutely.
is.
And that will be, again, that'll be something that will be tracked on that Gantt chart that we provide to you.
Okay, good, thank you.
Other questions? Councilmember Abel.
Is the duration of phase two, I thought it said something like
41 weeks.
41 weeks,
42
so-
weeks. Yeah, so we're looking at, give or take 10, maybe 12 months at the most. So hopefully about this time next year, you'll see me back in front of you with another nicely done report with phase two included along with it, and give you the opportunity to kind of review that and look to move forward with acceptance.
Thank you.
Council members, other questions?
Move to approve
Well,
resolution.
hold on, whoa, make sure there's no other questions. Councilmember Schuster.
Okay, move to approve the resolution approving the task work order for the wastewater master plan phase two.
Second.
Motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No nays. Resolution is adopted. Thank you, Mr. Tinch.
Thank you.
Next item is a resolution approving subdivision plat application SP 21-01, a replat for unaddressed property lying at the southeast corner of Bullard Parkway and North 56th Street. Senior Planner Gus Carpus will explain. Welcome, Mr. Carpus.
Welcome, welcome. Good evening. What I have before you tonight is a site plan, I'm sorry, a subdivision or plat for the Fountain Shops at Temple Terrace. It's a replat of Block 1, lots 1 through 18. The owner of the property is Paragon Property Group, downtown Temple Terrace LLC. It is located within the downtown redevelopment area. And again, they're looking to combine lots 1 through 18, about 2.79 acres into one parcel. Here's the aerial of the property back when the Burger King was still out on there. And this is how we platted the property back before we started selling the parcels off for development. And what they've done now is they've submitted a plat to combine that whole area where the new development has been started, almost completed here, into one parcel. And there's the development that the council approved for that site. So what they're seeking to do now, the council put a condition on the site plan approval to come back and plat the site. And so that's what they're doing now, is they're doing a partial replat of the property by putting all the 18 parcels together. So staff did recommend that the council approve the resolution for SB 2101 for the creation of Fountain Shops at Temple Terrace, the replatting of Block 1, lots 1 through 18, which is the unaddressed property. It does have addresses, but for this purpose, it would not, because it has a number of individual addresses for the tenants there now. But so they're seeking for approval so they could file this with the county.
Thank you, Mr. Carpus. Are there members of the public who wish to comment on this item? Seeing none, council members, questions?
I just thought we'd already done this. Didn't we? Something similar to this not that long ago? Didn't we do this already? Or was it another area that we replatted?
We haven't done this on this piece
I
of
thought we had done this on it.
property.
I had no questions.
Several years ago, we proposed the council to split these into smaller lots so that we can sell 1 through 9 and 9 through 18 or 10 through 18
Maybe that's what I'm.
to developer. Fortunately, Paragon came in and said we want all 18, which is great. Right now, they're just trying, this is a process to bring it back under a single ownership.
Yeah, this is unique, and when typically what a developer could have done is just went to the county and combined them through description and wouldn't have even had to come here, but the council put the condition that they come back here, so that's what they're doing at this point.
We'll have to go through the same thing when we sell the other one, because we
Correct.
sliced it into small slices.
Correct.
Yeah. Other questions, council members? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve SP 21-01?
Move to approve the resolution approving subdivision plat application SP 21-01, a replat for unaddressed property lying at the southeast corner of Bullard Parkway and North 56th Street.
Second.
Motion and a second. Councilmember Abel, I think, got you by a tenth of a second, probably. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any nays? No nays. The resolution is adopted. Thank you, Mr. Corpus. Next item is a resolution to approve or deny the petition for reconsideration of rezoning reclassification application RZP 21-04 for the residences at Overlook Drive, 8701 Overlook Drive. Senior Planner Gus Carpus will explain. Welcome again, Mr. Carpus.
Good evening again. Okay, so what you have before you tonight is a petition for reconsideration on the action taken on application RZP 2104 residences.
That's the wrong.
Oh, this, we don't have a slideshow for this. There's no presentation for this. The applicant is here. This, staff does not have a presentation for this since the applicant is asking for the reconsideration. So again, the public hearing is for a petition for reconsideration. The applicant is asking that the staff, that the city council reconsider the action they took at their November 2nd city council meeting for the denial of their RZP 2104, their rezoning application. It was presented and the council denied the application. They have resubmitted per the code the petition for reconsideration. Now, what this does is it allows the council to listen to their presentation or their argument, and the council can decide whether or not to accept their petition. If the council accepts their petition, they are then, in essence, allowing them to come back with a rezoning application for a first hearing. So basically, they're starting the application all over again with the first hearing. We are not approving the application that was before the council previously. So what the applicant is doing is asking for reconsideration and asking to bring their application back. Now, staff has looked at this, and staff has made a recommendation on this. And I'm asking that the council consider granting the resolution for approval that would change the zoning classification as they applied. But I'm asking that in doing so, that when they do submit, that it be considered, conditioned that they also submit at that time their site plan. So when we were looking at it before, we were looking at the rezoning application only, and then they had a conceptual plan. What I'm recommending is that the council approve the petition for reconsideration, conditioned that when they bring back their rezoning application, they also bring to us their site plan application. And that site plan application be done in accordance with Division 4 of the ordinance, which is the downtown overlay district, which in theory, it should be done anyways because it's in the downtown overlay district, and that it be held to the RMF multifamily residential standards in terms of the bulk and that type of stuff also, which is very similar to the Division 4 of the downtown overlay district. So staff is recommending that the council approve the reconsideration, conditioned that the application for rezone also be included with the site plan. Now, the council can also do it without that. The council can deny it. So, but staff is just recommending that if they do approve it, that they do it in conjunction with the site plan application. The applicant is here along with the representative.
Thank you, Mr. Carpus. Prior to questions, if the applicant or his representative would like to make a presentation. Good evening, sir.
Thank you. Good evening. For the record, my name is Stephen Thompson. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Najmi Thompson in Bradenton, Tampa, and St. Petersburg. No testimony under oath, so I don't have to be sworn.
I don't believe so.
Okay. Well, certainly, I appreciate the opportunity for the board, the council, to reconsider this application. Let me begin a little bit with the process that my client went through. And I think it's very important. I do a number of rezoning petitions, site plan approvals, and I always tell my clients, the first thing you really need to do before you even submit an application is meet with the staff and talk a little bit about what you're proposing. So this was even before they purchased the property. They set up a meeting with the staff and they said, we want to do a plan development. These are some ideas we'd like for you to consider. The staff basically said, yes, that looks like it's consistent and compatible. We think we could support something like this. So my clients went back, they closed on the property, and then they submitted a rezoning application to the PD, not with the site plan. The staff stated that, the staff in their initial review of the application made a determination that it was consistent with the city's comprehensive plan. After we purchased it, we also submitted it to the Hillsborough County planning staff. And the planning staff also found that this rezoning petition was consistent with the comprehensive plan. The city's Community Development Department, in preparing the staff report to the council, basically said that this request was consistent with the comprehensive plan, and this is from the basis for the staff review. Out of their report, the proposed change is consistent with the goals and objectives of the City of Temple Terrace's comprehensive plan and strategic plan. At the hearing, certainly the professionals made their opinion known that it was consistent. There was no opposition to this request. It's my opinion that there really was no legal basis for the council to deny the application. again, there was no evidence put into place that could be the basis for denial. All the evidence that was submitted was you had the planning commission staff saying that the request was consistent with the comprehensive plan, your own development staff saying that the request was consistent with the plan. I'm not so sure I understand what the staff is asking for, but we don't have a problem with processing a site plan. And I understand the reasoning behind it. You can rezone it PD and kind of not know exactly what's going to go there. We don't have a problem with working with the staff and with the community and with the council in developing a site plan that, Temple Terrace can be proud of. The only caveat or concern I have is as we move forward, we'd like to make sure that we get the rezoning to PD because there's the possibility that, the plan might not get approved. But we want to move forward and make sure that even if we go concurrently, if the zoning can be approved and maybe there's still some concerns about the site plan, we have the PD. Hopefully the original, the first initial development plan can be approved together with the PD. But again, we want to be in a position to also have the plan development approved. But again, I think what's being proposed by the staff makes sense. We're willing to work with the staff, and we're looking forward to coming back to you with a rezoning petition and a site plan that meets your needs and the city's needs. And my two clients, Mr. Thomas and Mr. Weeks are here. I think one would at least like to, again, address the council and indicate our commitment to the property and also to the city. But we would respectfully request you to reconsider, give us the opportunity to come back, to develop a plan that meets your goals and objectives.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Good to see you all again, Charlie Thomas. I just want to share the process matters that when we first started this process, we met with Gus, we met with Amir, we met with the development team to find a product that would be appropriate for the area. Vice Chair, we've taken your concerns on density. We're not tied into it. That was the direction you told us. This put what it is, and then we'll negotiate back down there. But we're open to doing less density. We feel that the sentiment of the board is that we want more ownership. So we're open to do more of a multifamily attached ownership style property than rental property. Our vision, so the full corner, we own that piece, 8702 and 8701. So our vision for the corner is to be the anchor that leads down back to 56th Street with the multifamily density. Kind of speaking to what happens on that west side is that your comprehensive plan has already kind of laid out that to support the downtown development district that you've outlined high density in that west corridor. And so as you'll see, the future development will go that we're going to build on those two parcels. Our neighbor in the apartment complex is going to remodel his, as he's already in the process of doing. And that whole streetscape going down Overlook and Grove Hill is going to move to high density. That's what happens in those neighborhoods, because what happens is the property value goes up for the property owners because they know they can get higher density, so they're going to sell at some point in the future. And then other developers like myself are going to come in and build high density attached single family. And that's going to drive some of those desires that you all have for that. And the price point, the economic development, one of those things that you asked for. So our current budget is $2 million, which puts a $16 million economic development back and brings back into the tax base. Those are the kind of things that drive those numbers that we're talking about of what's going to drive those people into the city. So we're open and willing to work with staff, as we have this whole time. We started this process 7 months ago, and we've had multiple iterations of saying, hey, what does the council's appetite for? And let's make sure we have a product that looks like that. And we apologize because we were informed that there wouldn't be a conceptual site plan, or we would have given you a beautiful conceptual site plan to say this. This was just one of the evolutions of a plan that they had. And they said, oh, we need to put this on there because this is just a formality. Because we would come in prepared and give you the full schematic, the floor plans, the elevation, so that you can see how it ties into the park, how it ties into the community, how it gives you the streetscape that our property is consistent with all the other properties down the line with our partner, so that we're not adversely affecting the neighbors, but being an asset to the community. But thank you for your time.
Mr. Thomas, a real quick question. I don't want to go out of turn because we haven't had public comment yet, but what are your thoughts on the staff's recommendation to bring this forward with a site plan if in fact it's improved to come back?
We are amenable to that. We're amenable to, when we originally started the process, we actually started with a site plan. So we've already submitted our site plan application. And then during that process, we were told that, no, we can't do the site plan. You actually have to go through the rezoning. So our initial plan was to come to you with a site plan and say, do you like this? What do you like? Let's get something that you guys find. And so that's how we got to this process. So we just got a step ahead, and so we're kind of pulling back. And so we want to be proactive. Our approach to development is understand the rules, get with the participants, understand what they're looking for, and then put that product there.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
So the format here is we ask for public comment on this, but we always give the petitioner the last opportunity to respond to any public comments that are made. Mr. Carpus, anything else?
Nope, I'm standing here.
Are there members of the public who wish to comment on this item? I want to remind the public, okay, I want to remind the public prior to public comment that the issue before us tonight is simply whether to grant another hearing that's not to approve or disapprove. So I just want to remind you of that. So welcome, ma'am.
Yes. Gail Acton. I live at 8721 Overlook Drive.
Good evening.
Now, I don't know what his proposal is to still build apartments there on the left-hand side and single homes on the right-hand side. Is that what you're getting at?
No, ma'am. It will be a single-family attached, semi-attached properties on both sides.
On both sides?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Single homes?
So ma'am, the way this, if you can pause the time for a second, Cheryl, so I don't take off her time.
Thank you.
You have to address us and the petitioner and staff, and we'll make notes of the questions you ask, and then after the public comment, we'll invite the applicant to come back up and answer any concerns that the public raised, because when he speaks to you back and forth, we don't get it on the record.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Anyway, I'm glad it might be single homes. As long as it's not apartments. I have apartments behind me. We have apartments down on the, down the street from me on the right-hand side. And I said, don't want any apartments. And single homes, I don't know exactly what they can be and how many there will be. That's what my concern is. That's all.
Very good. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
I think there were other members of the public. Mr. Pogorlich. Good evening, sir.
So, I was here for the last
State your
one.
name. We know who you are, but
Sorry, David Pogorlich, 1534 North River Hills Drive. So I was here for the last presentation, and quite frankly, other than a trip down memory lane, I didn't hear anything new. There was no addressing the density and the lot sizes and the frontages and all that good stuff. So, lack of hearing anything new, I don't see any reason you have to approve this now. There was some veiled promises about ownership, et cetera, but the last time he was here, I think it was Mr. Shishler that asked him about changing the density, and there was a long sigh before he said, we'll look at it. But, these guys, they've already looked at that property, and the density is going to be the density for them in order for them to make the project work. I just, some veiled promises about ownership, it doesn't do it for me. It may do it for you, but it doesn't do it for me. Thank you.
Pogorlich, are there other members of the public who wish to comment on this item? Seeing none, Mr. Carpus, do you want to speak before I have the petitioner back up, or do you want me to just go right to the petitioner?
I don't know, unless the council has anything for me, I have nothing to add.
Council, do you have questions for Mr. Carpus, and then we'll have the petitioner come back up at,
I do.
for Mr. Carpus, or the, okay.
So it's been said that staff approved that, or said, agreed, that the rezoning or plan was consistent with the comprehensive plan.
So now,
My understanding that what he means to say is that the rezoning not the plan, not what is going on in it, what color the paint is, none of that. This is strictly that we are considering the rezoning of this property to PD.
That is correct, council member. And that night, we had two similar requests for rezoning to PD, and on both of them, I made it really clear that the plans that were attached, these are conceptual. They will be reviewed at a later date as a site plan application. So recommendations are based solely for the rezoning, not on any type of plan that was attached to the rezoning.
I wanted to make sure, because the speaker indicated that the staff had said, yeah, that go for it, this will be
And
approved.
that's the same too for the planning commission staff. So now when the site plan comes in, that does not go to the planning commission staff, that stays with the development staff. So the planning commission was only also looking at the rezoning and the comprehensive plan.
Thank you very much.
Are there other questions for Mr. Carpus before we have the petitioner come back? Okay, now, Mr. Thompson, before you get up, you can do this however you want. We're at the point now where we're going to open it up for council member questions. And then after those questions, if you want to make a summation at that point. So I don't know who wants to come up for questions. And then we'll give you an opportunity for a summation at the end. Are there, well, Mr. Thomas, would you like to first of all reply to the public comment and then we'll ask questions?
Yes.
You don't have to, it's an opportunity.
Yep, the first one, the question would be, it would not be single family, it would be a townhouse style, single family attached, to answer that question. And on the issue of density, just the site constraints itself doesn't really lend that we can't do that type of development, but the parking requirements, it's just math. We can't get 8 units and meet all the city parking requirements. That won't work for that type of development. And we're not seeking that. But I think that would alleviate, it's the 2-car parking requirement needed for that, plus the buffers and the other things that are required, wouldn't allow for that.
Council members, are there questions for Mr. Thomas? Okay, very good. If you or Mr. Thompson would like to make a final statement, that would be appropriate.
Again, Stephen Thompson for the applicant. Again, what I'm hearing is the need to see the plan. And I think that's really, the gentleman spoke about nothing to change. Well, we're not proposing anything today. All we're asking for is reconsideration so we can come back with a plan. And at that point in time, we can begin to talk about, the layout, the density, the type of units and what kind of units they are, but just give us the opportunity. We're willing to work with the staff, the community, and the council. Just give us the opportunity, and we understand that we're gonna have to come back with a plan. The council always is going to be reviewing a PD plan. We understand that, it's going to be a process where we're going to have to work together, and we're willing to do that. I think what we're asking for, just give us the opportunity to go back to the drawing board and come back and work it through planning staff and the community and bring it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. So, council, just want to frame this before we have a motion. Keep in mind, everybody, that all we're doing here is deciding whether to allow them to come back before us. We're not approving or disapproving. We have 3 options. We can confirm our denial and disapprove their request. We can approve their request, or we can, as Mr. Carpus is recommending and they've indicated they're agreeable to, we can approve their request with the caveat condition that they bring a site plan with them at the rezoning request. Those are pretty much our 3 options. Mr. Cicero?
Yes, I would like to ask Ms. Sishon, our attorney, any issues with the third option, coming back with the approving the application, if you will, with the provision that the site plan comes with it at the same time. Do we have any issues with that?
That should not be a problem.
Okay, all right.
Council members, is there a motion?
I move to approve how do I get this right now? Move to approve the resolution to consider the petition for reconsideration of the rezoning reclassification application, RZP 21-04, for the 8701 and 2, I assume, Overlook Drive, with the provision.
Don't add two.
Pardon me? Only on one, okay, so, okay, that's what I want to clear. 8701 Overlook Drive with the provision that they also bring a site plan for review at that time.
I'll second that motion.
Motion and a second. Is there discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor signify with aye. Aye. Any opposed? No nays. Resolution is approved, and we will see you again soon. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the first public hearing and first reading of Ordinance 1518, approving the zoning reclassification of 234 Bullard Parkway, RZP 21-02. I'll open the public hearing and ask anyone who intends to speak on this matter to stand for the oath administered by the city clerk.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Very good. This could be a long meeting. So, request city attorney to please poll the council for ex parte communications.
If any of you have received any ex parte communication regarding this matter, please state so at this time. State when that occurred, with whom it occurred, and the sum and substance of that communication. If it was a written communication, please provide that written communication to the city clerk for the record. I believe that some of you have already sent what you received to the city clerk, and I believe I saw them, and I did forward them by email on to applicant's attorney, Mr. Hudson, and he's waving. I think he got those. And I believe the clerk, either the clerk or Celeste, sent those to him as well. But if you've received anything other than that or had any oral discussion, please state that now.
So I received that, but only if I receive something other than that, do I have to say it?
Well, you should say that too.
Okay. I received an email from Carol Dell, which I have forwarded along to the city clerk.
And I also received the email from Mrs. Dell and nothing else.
Other than the aforementioned emails, I've had none.
I have had just emails with Ms. Dell and Ms. Tumbleson, which I forwarded to the city clerk and to you.
Okay, I've had the emails from Mrs. Dell. I also had an email from a Mr. Douglas Barler yesterday, and his topic was he just wanted us to be fair with our consideration of the item. I also had an in-person conversation with Jack Ritter November 10th after a code board meeting, and his concern was he wanted to save the house on the property.
Very good. City Planner Celeste Lau will explain. Welcome, Ms. Lau.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. The item I am presenting tonight is RZP 21-02, which is a zoning reclassification for a property located at 234 Bullard Parkway. This item was heard for the first time on November 2nd, but was subsequently postponed to November 16th and then postponed again to tonight. The subject property is located at the northwest corner of the Bullard Parkway and Ridgedale Road intersection. The property consists, or the subject site consists of 2 parcels that are currently zoned commercial office. The applicant is proposing to rezone it to planned development. The size of the property is approximately 1.45 acres. On the left, you'll see the existing zoning map where you'll see the 2 parcels in pink showing the commercial office designation. On the right, you'll see the proposed zoning map with the properties in purple showing the planned development designation. The applicant is requesting to rezone this to PD to allow for both commercial office and commercial general uses. They are proposing a 9,000 square foot mixed use office and retail building with a financial institution with the drive-through as its anchor. The remainder of the building will be used for retail and office uses. At the November 2nd hearing, the applicant submitted this conceptual plan based on some comments and concerns by both the council as well as the public. They have resubmitted a revised concept plan, which I will show. With this revised concept plan, there have been 2 waivers that have been removed. Both of these waivers deal with the northern elevation of the building, one dealing with the blank wall and the other dealing with the glazing requirement. The applicant has also removed 4 parking spaces, so now they are requesting 50 spaces instead of 54. Also at the November 2nd hearing, staff heard some comments about the request of waivers during the rezoning process. And through the Land Development Code in section 12-235E2, it does state that applicants are allowed to request waivers from the Land Development Code for a plan development zoning designation. Also, in section 12-288, waivers may be requested and approved within the CRA as long as City Council finds that they are consistent with the intent of the Land Development Code, as well as meets the following criteria. So those are the 5 that I've listed that essentially states that these waivers meet some type of hardship. And with that, here is a revised list of the requested waivers that the applicant is asking for. Again, the 2 that have been removed, one is from section 12-291C5 for the blank building wall on the northern elevation. The other is 12-291C7 for the required minimum of 50% transparent glazing, again at the northern elevation. The remaining 5 have not changed with the exception of number 4, where the applicant is now requesting 50 parking spaces instead of the 54. Planning Commission staff found the request consistent with the comprehensive plan. City staff recommends that council approve the ordinance for RZP 21-02. That concludes staff presentation. The applicant is here as well, and they also have a presentation, but I will stand for any questions you may have.
Okay, we'll hear from the applicant first. Good evening, sir.
Is this okay? There?
Think so?
Good evening, council. My name is Tyler Hudson. My address is 400 North Ashley Drive, and I'm a partner with the law firm Gardner Brewer in Tampa. It's an honor to be here on behalf of the applicant. If I could share my screen, or your screen. So with me here this evening are we have Brad Carnes, who's the contract purchaser for the property, and the developer, Ty Maxey, who's a certified planner and is going to speak in a little bit about some of the waivers. Michael Northcutt is the project architect, and while we're not getting into any architecture at this conceptual stage, he is available to answer any questions, as well as Chris Mears, who's our civil engineer. I want to thank council for giving us an opportunity to even be here. Obviously, we were here about a month ago. We continued the hearing because I think there was somewhat pervasive confusion, which we'll take responsibility for, about what we were asking for approval for at that time and what was going to come down the road. And I think there was also a little bit of confusion on some of the waivers. So we're here this evening to alleviate as much of that confusion as possible, and I think be very crystal clear about what we're seeking approval of tonight versus what is going to come down the road through subsequent process under your land development code. So what we're seeking approval for tonight is the conceptual site plan that Celeste showed just a second ago, the list of waivers, because the waivers are the text version really of what that conceptual site plan shows. That conceptual site plan, those parking spaces, those boxes, those are all premised upon those waivers being granted. And then third, what we've asked, and I believe that your city attorney has agreed to, we want this landscaping exhibit that's in front of you to be a part of the record for this evening's proceeding, and that there is going to be a detailed site plan to come. That's not what's being considered tonight. What's being considered tonight is the conceptual site plan, those waivers, but again, to give a sense of the direction we are going in as those details evolve, this landscaping exhibit would be part of the record for this evening as well. I think folks are pretty familiar at this point where the site is. It's at the very edge of the CRA, the overlay district. The elevations you see architecturally on screen, that was supposed to be my prompt about what is not being considered tonight. These elevations, these have changed a little bit, but what you see on screen, you are not approving, and we are not seeking your recommendation at all, or your approval, not recommendation, on any architectural elevations. Those are going to come in a subsequent process. Again, we're talking about a 9,000 square foot building. I think maybe last time there was a little bit of confusion. Part of the site elements are really driven by the fact that the primary user of this is going to be a credit union that does have a drive-through facility, but this isn't a 9,000 square foot credit union. It's going to be a 6,000 square foot credit union, and there's going to be the remainder of the site will have some type of retail, potentially office use. And we don't know quite who that is yet. So on the waiver reductions, obviously the northern, the blank wall, which I know there was a lot of concern about, we heard that loud and clear, as well as the lack of glazing. Those waivers are gone. Now, we can't show you what it's going to look like necessarily, but we are going to bring you a detailed site plan that's going to have to meet your code as it is written. Two waivers are also, I think, reduced in intensity. Actually, the tree waiver hasn't changed. We still need a waiver from that percentage. However, as Ty will talk about in a little bit, we were able to preserve. It's a 26-inch caliber tree that's at the kind of the northwest edge of the site. That actually, that tree right there. We are able to save that, as well as the tree that we've always pledged to preserve. Go back to the PowerPoint. And as well, the one waiver that was reduced in intensity was parking. I know there were some concerns about this site potentially being over-parked. We've reduced our request from 54 spaces down to 50. And again, I mentioned this in the last time, that there's some developments inherently about trade-offs. It's about trade-offs between geometry, terrain, use, parking, things like that. It's also, though, about trade-offs really within your own comprehensive plan in your land development code, because your comprehensive plan allows in this area, on this piece of land, up to a 4.5 FAR, which you don't even have that type of FAR in certain areas outside urban downtown Tampa. You could potentially ask for a building that would require 1,000 parking spaces based on the uses it would generate, but your overlay code separately has some parking maximums in place. So what we're trying to do with this project is find that balance, and given the leases that we're going to have to enter into, not just with the credit union, but also with the other users of this building, we think that 50 spaces, again, it's less than what we originally asked for, and is an appropriate use of the real estate that's also going to serve the tenants who are going to be in that space, so we avoid a situation where people are driving into the residential neighborhood. Yeah, I think I kind of alluded to this already in terms of the reduction of the scope of the waivers. I think you guys have seen this slide already, and with that, I'll ask Ty Maxey, who's a certified planner, to come up and walk through, I think, in detail, the reasons and the justifications for each of the waivers, and then I'll couple it a bit after that.
Prior to that, can we take about 30 seconds and have Brian, our AV tech, can you focus the camera on this landscape plan and give the audience about 30 seconds to take a clip? You guys can move up if you need to. Well, I'm not sure they'll be able to see it from
Next
where.
time we'll bring it to you.
He's already done it.
But,
It's up.
Yeah, but he hasn't had it up there for long enough for them to really see it. So just give them a few seconds we're staring at it. They don't get to see if they have any questions, so.
I also want him to go back to the waivers.
Okay, well, we'll have time for that, but.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, Brian, that's good. Thank you. I apologize for the delay. I just want to give them an opportunity to see that, so. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, council, mayor. For the record, my name is Ty Maxey. The address is 405 North Hubert Avenue, Tampa, Florida. So I'll discuss the 5 waivers. As Mr. Hudson indicated, we've reduced the waivers from 7 down to 5. The first waiver has to do with the side yard setback. The overlay code requires a maximum 5-yard setback on the side of the property. We only have one side on this property because we have 3 frontages. And to allow for circulation around the building for access and for drive-through access, it's nearly impossible to have the building only 5 feet from the property line on that side property line. So we're asking for a waiver to that. The next waiver is to allow an increase in the front yard setback. Your code mandates a maximum 10-foot setback along any frontage. You want the buildings to be brought forward. Again, to allow for vehicular access around the building, access through the drive-through, appropriate parking spaces, we've had to push the building back from the frontage and ask for an increase in those setbacks. These are actually reduced a little bit from what we initially proposed. We initially proposed 2 rows of parking and a vehicular drive along the frontage, but we've reduced that down to 1 vehicular drive and 1 row of parking. So we've been able to bring the building forward a little bit more than what we had originally proposed. The code mandates that no more than 50% of the parking may be along the frontage, along 50% of the frontage of the property. It's kind of a confusing code requirement, but because of the building shape and the size with 3 street frontages, it's nearly impossible to only allow less than 50% of the parking spaces along that frontage. So we've had to ask for a requirement. We also have the 2 access drives, one on Bullard Parkway and one on Ridgedale. So to allow for the safe and efficient design of parking spaces on the site, we're asking for a waiver to this requirement. And I'll look at that again in a couple slides. Here we are. So before when we came to staff, our site plan proposed 26 spaces within the frontage area. And with our new proposed plan, we have only 12 spaces along the building frontage area, but which is a reduction of 46% from what we had originally proposed, but it still requires a waiver to that code requirement that no more than 50% of your parking spaces can be in the front. Waiver 4, as Mr. Hudson had indicated, your code has a maximum number of parking spaces. For a site like this, you are proposing that only 36 parking spaces shall be allowed on the site. That typically doesn't match with market standards as well as other parking codes, within jurisdictions in this area. So we've had to request a waiver to allow up to 50 spaces on this site. That will allow for employee parking as well as appropriate customer parking. That way there will be no congestion, there will be no one spilling out onto adjacent properties. I think we received a comment that the adjacent property was concerned that if our site didn't have enough parking, people would start to park over at the library site. But with the waiver that we're requesting and 50 parking spaces, we feel that's appropriate for employees as well as the consumer. And Tyler had touched on this in the fact that the downtown overlay you want intensive development down there, and that's what your code allows for. So to allow for intensive development, you kind of have to have the parking to satisfy that, to support that. And so there's kind of a little bit of conflict between allowing the development that you want in your overlay and mandating that there be a maximum amount of parking spaces, which is less than market standard. We did, since we've been here, we came back before you tonight. We're able to preserve one additional tree up in the northwest corner of the property, and we're continuing to preserve the 32-inch tree that's down in the southeast corner of the property. The other trees are placed essentially almost in the center of the property, and it's almost infeasible to preserve them and allow for any development on this site. What we didn't have last time was a landscape exhibit, and many of the comments that came from your neighbors were that, you know, they're going to strip out all of these trees on the property and nothing's going to be replanted. Well, that's not true. You do have a landscaping code. This is an exhibit which illustrates additional landscaping that will be either meet or exceed your code requirement. There's landscaping interior to the site within landscape islands in the parking area, as well as landscaping around the perimeter of the site, which serves to aesthetically, you know, augment the site. And I think I'll go back to Tyler.
Thanks, Ty. And I'm about the end of the presentation here. To the extent that there's a concern that the approval of this conceptual site plan would create some type of precedent that you may have issues with down the road, this is not unusual what we're asking for. I think given some of the dichotomy that Ty addressed between the intensity proposed under the comprehensive plan, but the challenge sometime in implementing that through your design code. The O'Reilly Auto Parts, that's about as far west of Bush Bullard 56 as we are east of it, was approved out in 2019, which seems like about a decade ago. But it had some similar challenges in terms of the siting of the parking. That was approved with 14 waivers. Of the 5 waivers that we're seeking in connection with this deal, this property, 3 of them were approved in connection with O'Reilly. And so I just wanted to bring that up in the sense of another type of retail serving front, some parking in the front, but certainly not as much as, I think that what they had approved, I think, is a little bit more than what we are actually proposing here. As Ty alluded to, there's a significant reduction in the parking on the front of the property than what we originally proposed. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, or we can go to public comment, but appreciate the opportunity to rebut.
Okay, we'll do public comment, and then I'm sure the council members will have some questions for both staff and the applicants. Okay, I know there are members of the public who wish to comment on this. I currently have one request only, and that's from Jan Tumbleson. So, Ms. Tumbleson? She's the only one that filled out a form, so pass them to the clerk, please.
I thought we didn't have to fill out a form if it was on the agenda.
No.
We're going to debate the rules.
No, to call them if we don't have a form.
We will, okay, hold on. We will allow all members of the public to comment. If you would, please fill out a form so that I can call you up in an orderly fashion. I would appreciate it. But all members of the public who wish to comment will be given an opportunity to do so. Okay. Ms. Tumbleson, welcome again.
Good evening. Okay, Mayor, Council, Temple Terrace resident. The entrance to the city from the east is Florida College, the golf courses, residential, and churches. 234 Bullard and Ridgedale, you will see oceans of parking and paving. Is this property under common ownership? Is this going to be considered as a strip retail, which the council just stated in the workshop they do not want a strip retail? Let's talk about O'Reilly's Auto Parts with their 14 waivers. First of all, this was based on the fact that there were no trees on the site. This was also based on the fact that all the commercial from the city limits to 56th Street is commercial. Okay, So this area, the 234 Bullard Parkway, has no resemblance of the O'Reillys. Okay, I want to talk about the waivers for the parking, which will affect other waivers. In Section 12 of the Land Development Code, requires only 36 parking spaces, and they're asking for 14 more parking spaces. Hillsborough County, which they cited, said the bank and retail only states they need 33 parking spaces. This is a waiver for asking at least 17 more spaces. Remember, the asphalt and the paving will affect other waivers. This is a site using any avenue. This site has not used any avenues for a reduction in parkings for asphalt or parking regarding compact spaces. If they're under common ownership, they can use up to 20% of the parking spaces can be compact, which decreases the information regarding the asphalt. Either one of these items, okay, they also haven't used any bicycle reduction for parking. Either one of these items is used to address and reduce the ocean of parking and paving lot. Okay, what about the loading zone? This is a 10 by 25 and a 14 height difference, which is not listed or shown on the site plan. Okay. Thank you.
Next is Jane Adamson. Welcome, Mrs. Addison.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Ms. Vice Mayor, and council members. My name is Jane Adamson, and I have lived in Temple Terrace for over 20 years. I have a vested interest in the development of this piece of property as a resident. I have read through the proposed ordinance. Several things stood out to me. The first is that there's a lot of concrete. 1.45 acres translates into about 63,000 square feet. If you look at the site plan, the building takes up about 9,000, leaving 54,000. And I estimate that at least 2/3 of that property is either paved or covered. And what is driving this heavy paving? The nature of the proposed project. This ordinance proposes to ask for rezoning so that it can include commercial. The developers state that they need as much parking as possible to make their tenants feel like there is enough. Please note the nature of the surrounding property, residential and a professional office space. The proposed commercial use does not blend well. The original zoning does, such as professional offices, medical offices, etc. However, locating commercial on this property extends the reach of 56th business unfavorably for the residents. It brings in noisy, all-day-long commercial traffic, as well as potential unwelcome commercial lighting. It should also be noted that CRA guidelines aim to reduce visible parking from the streets, which this project does not comply with. In fact, the developer has composed lengthy rationales for all of the variances, citing benefits. However, the need for those variances are driven because of the commercial nature of the proposed project, which is not in keeping with the surrounding properties. Sorry about the voice. To summarize, I still see a sea of concrete in the proposed project. The sea of concrete is generated because of the nature of the project, more parking spaces because of the commercial nature. City council members, I urge you to think about what we want for this city. We already have 56th, an extensive commercial area going through the center of town. To drag that commercial further into residential neighborhoods seems abhorrent to me. You, as council members, have been elected to decide what is best for our city. Do not let developers decide for us. We want and are motivated to work for the best, to keep our residential neighborhoods a place where families want to live and thrive. Please don't bring 56th over to Richdale. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Adamson. Next speaker is Kathy Spaulding. Welcome, Mrs. Spaulding. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Kathy Spalding. I live at 609 Herschel Drive in Temple Terrace. I've lived here for 48 years. This project, I looked at the current layout of the land. It's all grass covered, mostly grass covered. And the water soaks down into that land. They propose putting a stormwater runoff. But as we know, the rain is coming more faster and harder, not necessarily more, but a lot at a little bit of time. What happens when that storm runoff area fills up and overflows? It'll go on to Bridgedale, and then it'll go on to the property beyond that. I think that's needs to be rethought, and need to make sure that there's enough room for that runoff, or perhaps less concrete would be a really good idea. My other problem is that the picture showed some nice trees on that property, but they're going to have to take some of the trees away. And as we all know, climate change is here, and we need more trees. So taking out the large trees is a mistake. Even if they put in little trees, it'll take 50 years for those trees to make up for the ones they're going to take out. So I appreciate that they've put 2 back into the plan, but I think they need to consider a better solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Spaulding. Next speaker is Carol Dell. Welcome, Mrs. Dell.
Carol Dell, 1309 North River Hills Drive. I'm actually flabbergasted that I'm the only person who's been sending you all emails about this. But I will say that that's given you more time to read what I had to say, and hopefully you had a chance to digest all those things that I had to say. So I'm not going to go over any of that again. But I'm going to just say this. First of all, there's no way you can compare this parcel of land to the O'Reilly Auto Parts. This parcel of land is unique. It is an unofficial gateway to the residential area of Temple Terrace. And I think what bothers me the most about the plan for this unique piece of property is the 13 oak trees, and maybe it's 11 now, higher math, take away 2 that we're going to leave. All the oak trees that are going away and all the asphalt that is coming. And it's just disappointing that this piece of property might turn into actually what they have on their drawing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Dill. Next speaker is Ellen Snelling. Welcome, Ms. Snelling.
Good evening, Ellen Snelling, 521 Lantern Circle. And I just want to say that I can see both sides of this debate, I guess, that we're having. Not so much debate, but discussion. And I'm kind of attached to that property. I've gone to many meetings there, a lot of events. I drive by there all the time. It's beautiful with the oak trees. But that being said, I also know that the property has been for sale for a number of years. And as far as I know, there have not been very many viable offers. So now here we are, and there is an offer that's viable. It's, a credit union and some other offices, so nothing wrong with that. And I think that it should at least be considered. Of course, I don't like taking all those oak trees out, but like has already been said by the developer, a number of those are diseased. I mean, they're not like in the best shape. So there's probably a couple that are still very healthy, but the others are not. And the fact that they did come back, reducing the waivers, they were able to save another tree. And I do like the design that was offered as a possibility with a lot of nice landscaping all the way around and the water runoff there. So I think you just have to consider both sides. But what are the choices here? So we're going to have this property sit vacant because we're not seeing a lot of different companies and organizations come in that want to buy it. So I think it's unique because there's the 3 roads around it and just where it's located. So I just don't think we should have vacant property sitting there when the city could possibly be making taxes from it. If these businesses open up, we'll also offer jobs to people and it will serve the community. So I guess you have to decide which that you want to have. But I do like the design that was offered today. And I would suggest that you approve at least the zoning so that they can give their detailed plans. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Snelling. Next is Mr. Bullock. Welcome, Mr. Bullock.
Thank you. Good evening, David Bullock, 306 Bullard Parkway. So I appreciate you having me, Mr. Mayor, Mrs. Vice Mayor, council members. I don't want to tread over what other people have already said, but what I do want to say is I have the law firm, and I bought it back in 2010. I grew up on Mission Hills in Ridgedale. That's where I grew up. My first official job was working at the Recreation Center as a lifeguard. So to me, it was very important to preserve our city's history. And as I'm sitting here, as I'm listening to what's being presented tonight, what strikes me is we have people from outside of Temple Terrace proposing something about a very important piece of property and parcel exclusive of the house itself, but they're not talking about the community of Temple Terrace. And I believe the community of Temple Terrace is important and needs to be recognized. So my law firm, the building that it's at, it has been zoned for professional office space for almost 40 years. And in that time period, it has been a professional office space with professional services in it consistently for that time period. There are additional residential areas that are being built right across the street from this and further down Bullard Parkway. Not only is that going to create additional traffic on Bullard Parkway, but what it does is it creates additional customers and additional need for professional services. The reason why I bring this up is in this specific area, it's a unique area of Temple Terrace. Not only do you have my law firm that's across the street from Ridgedale on it, on that corner, across the street from Bullard, you've got the medical offices that are there. On the other side of this property, you have a dental office and a podiatrist, and you have a unique area where you have increasing amount of residential homes that can look to a professional service area in Temple Terrace and for our community, and there are a plethora of professionals in Temple Terrace that live here. So what my concern is, and what I heard tonight from the presentation was, we're gonna have a 9,000 square foot building, 6,000 of that is gonna be for a credit union with a drive-through, 3,000 of that, we don't know what it is. And the problem is if you change the zoning and you take away the professional nature of it, you have no control over what that additional 3,000 square foot of office space is, and it could be retail. And what my concern is as other people have mentioned, you have retail space that is on 56th Street, and we can consider that prime for retail. What we have is AT&T, you've got Chase Bank, you've got Starbucks, they're right there in that downtown redevelopment area. My concern is who is going to want to be off of 56th Street and in this location, bringing it closer into a residential area with increased noise, potentially crime, traffic. So I'm running out of time, but obviously I oppose it, and I actually don't think 50 spaces is enough for what they want to do, because I think that will be mostly taken up by the employees themselves, let alone their customers. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Bullock. Next is Renee Salazar. Welcome, Mr. Salazar.
Mr. Mayor, Co-Mayor, Council, thank you very much for allowing me to be here. My name is Renee Salazar. I reside at 107 Ridgedale Road. I am the first residence directly in front of this property. I have been seeing it vacant for quite some time. I am very much in favor of seeing development, but I would like to see that development be professional office spaces and nothing more. Retail, in my opinion, will be a problem. I know firsthand what the traffic is like in mornings and evenings or afternoons and during the day. And I'll tell you, it is not fun for me to get out, nor my children to get out of my driveway in the morning when the school is in session or coming to session, and in the afternoon when they're departing. People seem to have lost their courteousness this year, so this recently, so even if you have backed out of the driveway and almost out, they will not allow you to pull out. They will blow the horn until you go back in. Having more traffic and retail traffic at that particular location is going to impact me directly. And I don't think that any of you have done a study to look at that or to experience what I have experienced. So I truly oppose it going to a commercial. I think it's going to be problematic. I am fully in support of a development, a professional development space. I am fully in support of development and progress. But I agree with what Mr. Bullock said, that I think we need to reconsider this very carefully. For me, it is going to have a direct impact. And for my neighbor across the street from this property, them also, but they are out of town on sabbatical. They also are professors at the university, as am I. They're on sabbatical and are not here to speak. But I'm very concerned about the outcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Salazar. Mr. Begorlich. Welcome back, sir.
Thank you. Mayor, Vice Mayor, City Council, David Pogorich, 1534 North River Hills Drive. The reason for the waivers is very simple. They're trying to shoehorn a drive-through into a space that can't support a drive-through. It's a square peg in a round hole. But for the drive-through, they would be able to meet the setbacks. But for the drive-through, there would be less asphalt, there would be more parking spaces. And if you allow this to do that, this is going to be an untenable site, not only for the citizens, but for the tenants that end up leasing there as well. Everywhere you look on this, but for some of these little bushes and stuff that they try to sell you on, everything you see is asphalt. Every view is asphalt. July, nobody's going to want to go sit outside and have lunch or enjoy our city because it's all asphalt. And all that is being driven because they're trying to squeeze a drive-through in a site that can't really support it, which is why they need all the waivers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Begorlich. Next speaker is Mr. Ritter, Jack Ritter. Good evening, Mr. Ritter.
Good evening, good evening. Well, I'm Jack Ritter, and as so many have said, they've lived in Temple Terrace for a long time. I don't think anybody's lived here any longer than I have. 75 years now. It'll be 76 on the 15th. I remember that house, the Jobson house, was the first house you saw when you came down Temple Terrace Highway beyond the blinking light of 56 and Temple Terrace Highway. That was the first house. That house deserves to be restored. Mr. Bullock has done a hell of a good job restoring his. He jacked up the roof, built everything under it new. It looks nice, it's great. Now, the one thing I oppose is the entrance in and out on the Ridgedale Road for this. We got enough problems with traffic on Ridgedale. I'm not affected like Dr. Salazar is, but I go up there and sometimes in the daytime when these kids are getting out of school. My God, you try to pass, you can't pass. 2 lanes. They're bumper to bumper waiting to get in to pick up these kids. Sometimes you go up Ridgedale North and I get past. It's a double line road all the way up to Druid Hills. What's wrong? I tell you what, if you approve this, you just told the man that lives on Floto, the price of his house has gone down appreciably. So I'm opposed to it, and I hope y'all get the message. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ritter. Next speaker is Rod Quadja. Welcome, Mr. Quadja.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I just wanted to say something very, very simple. I'm in favor of this, in favor of development. And I just wanted to explain to everybody that can see this, this is only a conceptual plan. It's going to go through a lot of engineering to get to this and the finalized, including traffic, stormwater, trees, removal, all that. So that's what I wanted just to voice my honest opinion as a civil engineer. This is just a conceptual plan. So this property, as Arnel said, sat there forever. I think any impact or anything, it's going to be even better looking at the way it's going to be presented and approved by the staff when they review it. So I'm in favor of this development to be approved and rezoning done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Quadja. And the last request to speak I have is from Mr. Silverman. Welcome, sir.
Good evening. My name is Stephen Silverman.
My address is 412 East Madison Street in Tampa. I'm also a property taxpayer in Temple Terrace. However, I'm here as the representative. I'm the commercial real estate broker. My company is Tampa Commercial Real Estate, and I represent the Tomasinos, Paul before he passed away, and also Cheryl. I want to give you just a little bit of a perspective on some of the brief history of this property. The Tomasinos have owned this property for 40 years. It's part of the right of owning a property that you also can sell it. It's unrealistic for it to stay vacant. I've called the police on several occasions to come and get homeless people or people that have broken in out of that property. I don't think that's good for the city. At the same time, I understand the city's desire, and it's only fair that they should approve the best use. So I thought I'd tell you some of the things that I've been going through, and here are some of the facts. When we market properties, we get wide exposure, and we speak to a lot of people. I can tell you that in this environment, we have very little interest from just straight-out office developers. That business is just, that whole market is one of the softer markets now in commercial real estate. Nobody wanted to build a park, or last time they were discussing a restaurant. But I can tell you some of the calls that I did get. I got calls of interest to purchase a property to make it into a hookah bar. I got calls also to talk about doing a medical use, which is a medical marijuana clinic, CBD, and also there was pain medication. I don't think any of those uses are the kinds of uses you'd want at that property. There have been lots of discussions tonight about rezoning. Rezoning really isn't the issue. What you have, and you have spent a lot of time developing it, is the comprehensive plan. And the comprehensive plan has a floor area ratio for this property of 4.5. I'm not sure if people understand what that means, but 4.5 means you could develop over 200,000 square feet on this property, and that's allowed in the plan. So what this developer is doing, they're coming out with an alternative plan, a 9,000 square foot building. It's a community bank. A community bank is typically good for any community. It's where people go and shop and go and bank, and more people are moving in. And it's a fair and reasonable use, and it's a good compromise. It's a good outcome for the city and for the seller. So,
Mr. Silverman, he's an owner representative, not really a public comment. I'm not sure why but I think the 3 minutes doesn't apply to an owner representative, does it?
He is representing the actual owner.
So I'm going to let you to continue.
Well, I'm just about finished.
Okay, well, I'm going to let you continue because actually you're here as a representative, not as a member.
So I think it is a fair and reasonable use of the property to have a community bank there. I will tell you that the other party that I had been in discussions with, because there's be a little extra space, is a dentist. But they got tired of waiting. It's been dragging a long time. They're still open for it, but that's still a possibility. Thank you.
He said dentist.
Okay. Are there other members of the public who wish to comment on this? Okay. So, yes, we can. Our council members, have you seen that sufficiently? Okay, we can bring it back up if necessary. So I know we have a lot of questions, but and I have to give the petitioner an opportunity to respond to the public comment, but Mr. Stevenson, would you like to comment on this prior to going to the next step? Okay. Would the petitioner like to respond?
Tyler Hudson, 400 North Ashley Drive. We'll have an opportunity to respond after the questions in a rebuttal period, because if so, I don't need to specifically respond to public comment. I just want to be judicious with your time.
Once we will go to questions.
You're going to end the public hearing at that point?
Yes, once we go to questions, then I will, yes, so now would be a good time for you to,
Use that opportunity.
yeah, yeah,
Thank you, Mayor.
yeah. And I mean, there'll probably be questions, so this doesn't have to be your final word, but,
A couple of questions on this one. Again, Tyler Hudson, 400 North Ashley Drive, for the record. I want to kind of sum up where we are in this. And at the beginning of this proceeding, we all had to take oaths, and that's because this is a quasi judicial proceeding. And you all are put in the sometimes, I think, unenviable position of having to mediate between an individual's private property rights that they have, which are protected under numerous, certainly state laws. They even wrote a special amendment to the Constitution about it, number 5. You got to mediate that against zoning, which is almost a property right that everyone here has in some way, right? It's almost a community right. And you saw that, and you see that tension every time you guys get to meet here on the dais. But I think it's important to note that this is really about facts and the law. And in support of this application, in the record, you have the expert staff from your planning commission saying that this proposal is consistent with your comprehensive plan. That's the bedrock of development decisions, development law in the state of Florida, that development orders, permits, alley vacatings, rezonings have to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. And your expert staff, Mr. Hudson, no relation, has said that it is consistent. It also has to be consistent with the pertinent zoning ordinances, with your land development code. Your expert staff at the Community Development Department has found that this recommends approval of this application, and even notes that 4 of the objectives of Goal 9 of the Temple Terrace strategic plan are advanced by this application. We, the applicant, have provided substantial and competent evidence that the areas where we do not meet the strict technical requirements of your land development code are justified by the waivers that we seek. And you all are certainly not strangers to that waiver process. I think, as I alluded to earlier, there is a tension between what your comprehensive plan expects of this property and what can realistically be provided in accordance with your overlay requirements. And that's why, as Mr. Silverman alluded to, maybe there's been a dearth of interest in this particular property, but we're very confident that any development of this property that would come to you is going to require all, perhaps even more, than the waivers that we are requiring, because the demands of the comprehensive plan, the condition of the terrain, and the design requirements of your overlay code are irreconcilable. So whatever is going to happen to this property, we are highly confident that many of these waivers are going to be a part of it. Ty, Mr. Maxey, who is a certified planner and expert, has put into the record significant justifications for why those waivers are appropriate. In terms of the neighborhood testimony, the testimony in support and against, you certainly heard a lot of passion, but I don't think there was a lot of evidence, a lot of facts. And Florida courts, as you can imagine, have seen these issues come up with some frequency, and there is a long line of case law in the state of Florida that neighborhood testimony, opinions, conjectures, concerns about the stormwater overflowing, those are not the basis, those are not a sound basis for a decision in either event. The reason for public comment is to invite the public, and certainly the applicant, and neighborhood organizations to provide substantial and competent evidence. Here, there really wasn't much provided in the opposition. The reason that public notice happens isn't to poll the community about what they think about how a private person's property should be used. If that was the case, we could govern ourselves with polls on Facebook and Nextdoor, and I don't think anyone thinks that would be a good way to govern a city. So in summary, I think the balance of evidence is overwhelmingly in favor of approval of this application, because the expert opinions from your own staff, from the expert testimony brought by the applicant team, by Mr. Maxey, in terms of the waiver justifications, and the lack of substantial competent evidence in favor of a denial based on what you have in the record before you. So I thank you for your time, thank you for your patience on this one being a second run at this, and we're happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
thank you, Mr. Hudson. Okay, council members, we've heard from a number of people. I'm sure you have questions for a number of them. Councilmember Schisler.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for all the presentations. They were all quite interesting. I have several questions, but first one for our attorney, if I may. Sitting as we are as a quasi judicial body, does that cover zoning, or does that cover or zoning only issue, or does that cover also waiver issue? Because if we didn't have the zoning issue, we wouldn't go through, I don't believe, at the site plan review, when the waivers would come in under normal circumstances. Would we still be bound by the expert testimony issues for acceptance or denial of a waiver?
Your hearing tonight is quasi judicial, and your entire decision falls under the same blanket of quasi judicial. I'm not quite sure what you're asking.
Well, let me rephrase it then.
Okay.
Normal circumstances, a zoning petition would come in, we'd sit as a quasi-judicial party, and we do it. Now, then the site plan comes in at a later time, okay, and then we're asked to rule on waivers that come up across at that point.
Well,
It may or may not be.
happen that way, but it is not happening that way, and they're here tonight with their concept plan, which they are required to have at least a concept plan. I mean, they could have submitted a whole site plan if they chose to, but they're required to have the concept plan, and with that, their concept plan encompasses these 5 waivers.
Okay.
So
We can't cleave off the waivers.
you can cleave off the waivers because that's part of your decision. You, under section 12-235 of the city code, it says that council may deny or approve the application with or without modifications. This is under the section PD Plan Development Zoning Regulations. It says additional conditions of approval may be specified for the PD rezoning at the time of approval of the detailed final site plan application. However, they're wanting you to make a decision tonight with regard to the waivers.
Okay. The reason I'm asking it in that capacity is that some of the waivers are somewhat problematic. And if we approve the zone, I don't have a problem with the zoning, okay, because everything we did in this area is going to have to be PD anyway. I do have problem and questions regarding some of the waivers. For example, what is the city's calculation for the maximum number of parking spaces?
36 is the maximum requirement, and we're requesting 50.
Okay, but I mean, what is the calculation for that? You know, X
The
number.
formula?
Pardon me? Yeah, what's the formula?
Based on land use?
I mean, 36 just was snatched out of the air. We had a calculation for what that is. And
Good evening, everybody. Brad Carnes, Paradise Ventures. So the calculation for the required parking is 4 spaces per 1,000. So we're proposing roughly 9,000 square feet of retail. So 9 times 4 is 36. That's the code max.
Okay.
And we're proposing 50, which I believe is like a 5.5 ratio.
okay, that's a market-driven, that's a market-driven number based on,
Yeah, and Tyler actually misspoke in his presentation about the size of the credit union. It's actually 2,200 square feet. They're taking that western end cap. So we have about 6,000 square feet of available space for future offices or retail or restaurants. We don't have a lease in place for the other 6,000 square feet yet. But we do have a lease with Achieve. And I can tell you in all the leases we deal with on a regular basis that, 4 per 1,000 or 3 per 1,000 for a parking rate simply won't work for them. They actually ask for 10 per 1,000. So it's always a balance of, adhering to our tenants' needs and also meeting the city requirements. We're not proposing a sea of asphalt. We've got plenty of green space on the site. A third of the site's stormwater management, and we're proposing, above the code minimum landscaping. So
let me go back. You said they. Who is the they that looks for 10 parking spaces per 1,000 feet?
most any national retailer,
Okay, so there's
restaurant retail, yeah,
market's
yep,
driving.
yep,
Okay.
yep.
All right. That was my one question. The trees, Mr. Stevenson, what would be the mitigation fees that they would be responsible for if they were allowed to if we approve that waiver?
We haven't had the opportunity to see the landscape plan and do the offset, right?
Okay.
For the trees that are coming off, our arborist has estimated the tree calculation would be worth about $58,000.
That'd be the max, and then any trees that they retain would reduce.
And that would be offset by the
Okay.
trees and the inches that they put back on site, so.
Okay.
Again, this is one of those calculations that's done at site plan review.
I understand, but that's okay. And I'm not trying to hold anybody, I'm just trying to get a relative picture for the whole project, yes.
Sorry, I just want to make a correction. It's actually 63,600 for the total site for the
Okay.
amount of trees that they would be removing. Yeah, the 57,000 is just for the grand trees, which are going to be 24 inches or larger.
Okay, all right, cool, thank you.
that is-
Thank you for the clarification. Okay, so then,
Real quick, I just want to correct one thing. So we are preserving one additional tree than that
I
previous
understand,
calculation, so.
I'm saying that's the
Yeah.
maximum it would have been if you'd taken care of it.
Correct, and that doesn't take into
Relative
consideration all the proposed landscaping, correct?
All right, cool. The other question I had, so now we're saying that it's 6,000 square feet worth of other usage. Retail, professional office.
Well, yes, so we don't have a lease for the remaining 6,000 square feet yet, but we have strong interest from dental offices, a couple other medical users, and a coffee user.
And a what, I'm sorry?
A coffee user.
A coffee user, well, that would be neat. And then finally, my other question is the traffic pattern.
Yes, so I actually wanted to point out that we did conduct a detailed traffic study by Mike Razor. He actually wasn't able to be here tonight. I know there was a lot of concerns with the traffic, but we did submit a full site plan application, and the traffic study is a checklist item on that full site plan application. We were instructed by staff back in May to withdraw that and just proceed initially with the PD rezoning application and the conceptual site plan. But the results of the traffic study, and I'm not sure if these are in the record or not, but the adjacent streets, based on the projected trips, it's a total of 678 daily trips are expected to operate at acceptable level of service, both Ridgedale and Bullard and Flotto.
Even with school in session,
Our initial plan actually had access to all three roadways, and we received a comment from staff to remove the access to Flotto Avenue, which we did because of the adjacent community uses. So our current plan only has access to Ridgedale and to Bullard.
you got 650 additional cars a day going out into Ridgedale, whatever that number was, 600 plus cars a day going out onto Ridgedale, then either out onto Bullard Parkway or up or back into the residential.
Correct, and there was a trip distribution analysis completed by Mike Razor, and the adjacent roadway facilities operated at acceptable level of service.
If I can jump in real quick, I think that some of the traffic details would get, Brad's not a traffic expert, we have one, and a lot of those details are gonna get sorted out if there is a detailed site plan review for this, because the notion that it's all net new trips at the 648 number, that's not exactly accurate. I know enough to know that's not correct. I don't know any more than that.
They've done all the requisite traffic studies.
And that's what's a little bit, I guess, the backwardness. We have some elements of preparation for that detailed site plan. The reason we're here asking for the concept site plan and that to be approved with these waivers is we know that those waivers are baked into this concept site plan. We don't want to get a rectangle approved and then come back to you with architecture and say, by the way, there's 5 different waivers. This is really a measure of what we're trying to do is just be transparent about the ways that our intended site, which we think is a reasonable development program, doesn't mesh precisely with 5 technical areas of your code.
Well, I understand, but my problem with the whole concept is that we're being locked in with these waivers, and then when your site plan comes back, there's nothing we can do with it, okay? And that's why I feel it paints us into a corner with our responsibility.
So don't get too far ahead into discussion, because we got other questions.
Okay, all right, that's the basis for my questions, and I'll stop.
I mean, if you have more questions.
No, that's fine.
You
That's
still have
fine.
the floor, but.
That's fine. I'm good for now.
Councilmember, other questions? Councilmember Abel.
I'm not sure who this question's for, probably city attorney. Is there objective criteria for what constitutes a hardship that merits having these waivers?
I believe that it's similar to hardship with like a variance, and it needs to not be a self-created hardship. It needs to not prevent the property owner from making reasonable use of the property. It needs to be peculiar or particular to this particular piece of property. I don't know that you've addressed hardships clearly here.
Mention one thing on hardship, that, I mean, a Florida court has ruled that knowledge of adverse conditions does not make a hardship self-created. And obviously the fact that we're asking for the variances doesn't make the hardship self-created, less that's the snake eating its own tail. That would make everything self-created. I think the self-created hardship prohibition is for someone who builds their house at the 0 lot line, knowing there's a 5-foot setback, and then after the fact says, hey, I'd like a 5-foot setback on what I just did. So we don't, I mean, we can talk about the relative peculiarities of the site as a triple frontage site, and the fact there's only one side, the western, that's facing the Temple Terrace Library. But we don't believe that any of these hardships are self-created in that sense.
So you're saying that the hardships that exist are based on where the site is?
I'd say that the hardships that are created with respect to the conditions of the site is that you have a relatively small structure compared to the size of the land. That structure has been in place for some time. So, for example, trees have grown over time based on there being a void of improvement to the north and to the west. And so a hardship, when you pair that combined that there's 3 frontages and that this particular piece of land is subject to an incredibly specific design code about, for example, the amount of parking lot width and depth that confront streets. There's only so many places that anything can really go with the site that's shaped like this. The fact that it's in the overlay district and the fact that those 3 of the streets are labeled as frontages. If some of those factors went away, this might be a different situation. But this council, not you individually, but your predecessors have imposed certain comprehensive plan and land development code designations on this site. That's what creates, in our view, the hardships for this particular property.
Okay, so it's our site plan and our comprehensive, I mean, not our site plan, our comprehensive plan, and the conditions that we've set forth that you're saying are the hardships.
Yes, well, it's the application of those two. It's both. I think it's a combination of applying the requirement to strictly conform with those design requirements to the existing conditions of the site. That creates hardships for what we believe, for our development proposal, which we believe is reasonable. There's really no way to thread the needle around, for example, shifting all of our parking to facing the library while also maintaining the setback there. It's not possible to technically comply with all of the provisions of the code for this particular land.
Okay.
But a hardship does need to be peculiar to that piece of property and not apply generally to all of the properties that are also in that CRA. So if, I don't want to get into, I'm ready to debate with an attorney, but anyway. And also you have to consider the fact that, and there is case law to support, whether the person acquires the property knowing that these hardships are there.
There is case law on that, and that, I'll put you in the position of judges here, but knowledge of adverse conditions doesn't make a hardship self-created. There wouldn't be many cases about variances if buying a piece of property did. Self-created hardship means you caused it. You rendered something in a state of non-compliance with the relevant code, and then you seek the benefit of the hardship to get yourself out of it. It's using the hardship criteria as a get-out-of-jail-free card. That's absolutely not what's happening here.
It is also more difficult to find a hardship when it's new construction, because right now it's a blank slate and any size building could be built there. Smaller than 9,000 square feet, it could have a different use. That is your selection. So that you are creating.
Well, we're not creating a hardship. We're proposing a development program, which we're allowed to do because this is the United States and we're the private property owner. And you have, again, significantly competing objectives within the laws that y'all are subject to. You have a comprehensive plan that could allow, it doesn't guarantee a 4.5 FAR, to be clear. Someone could ask, though, for up to a 4.5 FAR. We're asking for, I think, 1/30 of that. And if you didn't like, if there are issues with the site, especially among certain members of the public, with these waivers, wait till you see it without waivers. I don't think it would resemble anything that anyone would want approved in their city, given the uniqueness of this parcel of land, having 3 frontages, having tree growth. That yes, that's an unfortunate part of sometimes the development process. That there are trees located in places that are wholly incompatible with the type of development that your overlay code would otherwise promote. And so that's why those waivers are being sought. We've mentioned like the last time we were here, I think it's highly probable that, and I wouldn't say I'm an expert, but I do a lot of land development law, that it's highly probable that any development for this land is going to have some waivers. There's no question about that. Maybe a few more, maybe a few less, maybe a little different. Tree waiver is absolutely something that would be required for what we think is any reasonable redevelopment of this property.
Thank you. I'm done.
Ms. Shoshone, my questions are also for you.
Vice Mayor, you're recognized, by the way.
Yes, thank you. Oh, you gave me the nod. I thought that was. It's been said that you'd like to separate retail from commercial. There's no way we can, that's not in our purview, correct? I mean, this zoning, this rezoning allows for the coffee shop, the dentist office, all those things.
The uses that I believe currently exist, it's under commercial office, so office would be there. I believe they're seeking to have all of the uses that are in a CO or in CG, commercial general, and everything that they mentioned, I believe, is within those 2 use categories.
Okay, and then it was also said that this plan is consistent with our plan. This offering is still consistent with our plan, even with the waivers?
I'm not quite sure what that statement was supposed to mean, because the rezoning to PD would be consistent with the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan does not really address these waivers. If you have someplace you want to direct me to, I'll be happy to read it. But I don't think that the statement that they're that the waivers are consistent with the comprehensive plan is quite correct.
And to be very clear, we never said the waivers were uniquely consistent with the comprehensive plan. Mr. Hudson.
That was my question.
Yes, so Mr. Hudson reviewed the PD plan, which had the waivers that you were presented with back in November. So that had 7 waivers. And it was his determination, as someone who's been doing this for a considerable amount of time, that the proposed application, which included the waivers, was consistent with the comprehensive plan. I think your city attorney and I would both agree it would be very out of sorts for someone at the planning commission to pick out an element of a PD plan and say which specific components are consistent with the comprehensive plan. They make a cumulative decision about that, and your staff also, the burden is on us to prove, to prove up the waivers, and so that's what we believe we have done and put into the record. But the consistency determination by the expert staff of the Planning Commission was about the program, including the waivers, not them uniquely.
That's all my questions.
Other questions? So I have a question for Ms. Lau. It's been so long ago now since you made your initial presentation. I need some clarification. When you made your presentation, your recommendation was for what? For approval of what or denial of what? What was your recommendation?
So the approval was or the recommendation was the approval of the rezoning. When I stated in my presentation, section 12-288, it's up to council to determine whether these waivers that the applicant is requesting is consistent with the intent of the land development code, as well as met those 5 hardship criteria.
Okay, so your recommendation, I'm still not clear what your answer was. Your recommendation was that the rezoning was recommended, but you made no recommendation on the waivers? Is that what you said?
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Sure.
We accept the waivers from the applicant, and the applicant is then needing to justify those waivers according to the Land Development Code. They're not tied to the rezoning and the comp plan amendment, okay? That the waivers are not, and I hope that's clear. The waivers are not approved by staff. We do not approve, we're not allowed to approve waivers. That is a function of council, not staff. So we can certainly present whatever a applicant gives us under the rezoning. It is a little unusual for us to tie waivers to a rezoning a petition. In fact, in this case, it is a little problematic because it sets the standards, and I can't remember which council person mentioned this, but it does go with the land, okay? That's problematic to me, and that's just a suggestion I think we need to be very careful with. I think Mr. Schoen had indicated that you can parge out the waiver request and just look at the rezoning. I think that may be more appropriate because, quite honestly, the waivers that are being asked for here sets this concept plan in concrete. And that's problematic when it comes to now reviewing a site plan, okay? That's the issue that I see with this. The parking calculations, and let me just kind of, I've heard several things here. The parking calculations in the CRA are different than your traditional parking requirements that are looked at as a minimum in any other part of the any other part of the city, in any part of the county. Our CRA dictates maximum, and the purpose of that is to eliminate parking and encourage multimodal and bus travel and pedestrian walkability, so on and so forth. That CRA requirement is in the entire CRA district, not on this piece of property. And we have always looked at the maximum parking that a project can have on our projects in the CRA, right? I will again say that the waivers to me are a little problematic, tied to the zoning. So, but our staff's suggestion is to look at the rezoning and approve the rezoning. We cannot approve, we, being staff, cannot approve those waivers. That is a function of council, not staff. And it is up to the applicant.
I understand that. I was asking what a recommendation was. I know that. Okay. Well, I have another question for either Ms. Lau or Mr. Stevenson or both. You guys have a lot more experience with this than we do. This is a very unique piece of property in that it's got visibility from the road on really all four sides. I mean, at least three, you know, it's a very oddly shaped piece of property. I am wondering how this property could be developed. I'm struggling in my mind. I'm looking at their chart and I'm trying to figure out, well, how could this be developed? Because if they put the building right up on Bullard, which is what we prefer, that's what we had Paragon, you know, right up, we want it close to the street. That would mean the parking would be on the north side of the building, no matter what they put in. And in Paragon's situation, we have Bertha Palmer Boulevard behind there. That's where we're trying to drive people. We want that to be the front of the building. But on this piece of property, that would put the front of the building facing Flotto, which would be odd. And that would also require all the cars to go out onto Ridgedale instead of just a portion of them, which would be awkward. And I'm not sure who would want to rent that when so it's not the same as it is on the south side of Bullard. So I mean, this is a tough question. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I mean, how would you develop this property in such a way that you wouldn't need some tricky engineering, I guess is what I'm saying. I don't know how you would develop it. How would you do that?
That's what he said. No matter who comes before us, they're going.
Well, I know. That's what I'm asking our people about that, though. Because I think all of us are wrestling with this. I mean, I too am struggling with some of these waivers, but I'm looking at that going, well, how would you put that building on there? I don't know how you would do it.
Parking all the way around the building. I mean, right now, you've got traffic and parking all the way around the building.
Can't hear you.
They can't hear you. They can't.
Nobody can hear you. Your
They can't hear
microphone.
you.
Sorry, I apologize. So currently, I mean, there's traffic flow all the way around the building, and there's parking all the way around the building. So I guess, I don't want to answer your question with a question, but what difference would that make to the impact of the neighborhood? So at least, the waivers that they're requesting here are fundamentals that we have always pushed development down in the CRA to achieve, all right? The setbacks, minimum parking, so on and so forth. That is typically one of those things that we look at when we do the land development code, right? The staff is going to recommend, and the planning commission is going to recommend it on the land use issue. But these issues are dealt with at site plan, not at rezoning. But I don't know that I have an answer for you on how can this be done. I don't know that I've had an opportunity to look at it in that depth.
I'm going to give you a chance to
Okay, thanks.
close up, but, okay. Council members, other questions?
I think you're going to have a motion in order for us to speak on this.
Well, we're
opinion.
getting there. We're getting there. I was make sure there's other questions.
Yeah, okay.
before-
I don't know if it's a question or a comment.
Yeah, that's
Well, we're getting there.
Yes, I do have a question.
Okay, Councilmember Chambers.
It's been mentioned about that we could have a 4.5 FAR on this property. That's correct, right? But would that not be limited to the parking spaces? Because if you have a 4.5 FAR, you would need 2,000 parking spaces and it wouldn't happen. So this piece of property, is that more limited to the area of the property and the number of parking spaces per the code?
Who's the question addressed to?
I don't have a clue who it's addressed to. You could take a crack at it, please. Thank you.
Councilman Tyler Hudson, 400 North Ashley Drive. Council, I think you hit the nail on the head about the tension here, that the comprehensive plan has expectations for this property that are severely limited, made impossible to implement through the overlay code. To the question about, well, what if you just push the parking to the north? That's where staff said they don't want an access point on Florida, so we can't put it there. We don't want to jam it necessarily up against the western part of the site that faces the library, but we can't have more than a 5-foot setback there. So that's the issue. And to address the question and perhaps the discomfort about the waivers being approved, we're asking for the waivers now, and that might be a bit unique, but so is this property. We know that that conceptual site plan that we showed bakes in those waivers. That conceptual site plan, I've got a 5 and a 3-year-old, they read picture books. That's the picture book of the waivers. They are inseparable from the conceptual site plan we have. And to address some of the terminology here about site plan, rezoning, this is a rezoning to a custom category that is based on a site plan. This is going to a PD. And the conceptual site plan we're asking for your approval of tonight, along with the waivers, which it illustrates, and the landscaping exhibit, that is this first step. There is a subsequent step where the architecture will evolve, where we can get into more detail about the trip generation, and that's the detailed site plan review, which is contemplated by your code. So this is the first step. It's an important step, and I appreciate your patience in going through the details here. But to the extent that approving waivers at the conceptual stage seems a bit unusual, again, it's because the property is unusual, and we know without any question they're going to be required. Nothing is going to change with the site or the comprehensive plan or your overlay code between conceptual site plan and detailed site plan. That's going to change the requirement about the tree waivers or the parking spaces or the width of the parking lot that's facing the frontage.
But wouldn't it change dramatically if we weren't dealing with a credit union that required the drive-through lane?
Not
I
necessarily.
mean, at that point, then you could move the whole project forward, put the parking in the back. You'd eliminate 2 or 3 of the waivers right off the bat.
potentially if the credit union was gone, that could change potentially some of the setbacks, but you could get we're at a 0.14 FAR. You could get someone who wants to get closer to that 4.5 and have a max, a minimal setback, absolute maximum development scenario where you still have all the same waivers. Like if someone sees that if this project, I don't even care how I say this, but alternative developments of a site like this that has been on the market for the duration that it has are, I think, likely to have a maximal impact on the land, which are going to result in similar waivers. To your point, Hazel, you're correct. So some might change because of if the drive-through goes away. But the parking, the trees, many of those waivers are very stubborn, and again, I respectfully submit are going to be part of absolutely any development configuration that a person proposes for property that they want to buy from this Temple Terrace resident, or Temple Terrace former resident.
Any final words, Mr. Hudson?
No, Mr. Mayor, just again, I thank you all for your patience on this and would ask for your support, a motion of approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to, at this point, close the public hearing and ask the clerk to read the title of the ordinance.
An ordinance of the City of Temple Terrace, Florida, rezoning 1.45 plus minus acres of land located at 234 Bullard Parkway from zoning classification commercial office to planned development Temple Terrace for RZP 2102, requesting 5 waivers from Land Development Code Sections 12-291, 12-294, and 12-768, providing for amendment to the official zoning map of the city, providing severability and effective date, and repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict herewith.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. All right, council members.
Well, in order to get this ball rolling, you need a affirmative motion, is that right?
That's the way it works.
Okay. In that case, I move to approve with a lot of comments, but I need a second before any of that can start.
For the purposes of discussion, I'll second.
Okay, well, let's get a little more clarity on the move to approve what?
I move to approve as presented.
The rezoning and the
Rezoning
waivers.
with the waivers.
Okay. Do we have a second? We have a motion to approve the rezoning and the waivers. Do we have
For
a
the
second?
purposes of discussion only, I'll second.
Okay. We have a motion to approve and a second. Council member discussion.
Okay. So the reason, believe me, I hate to tell you this, but yes, it is opinion, but this is what makes this job so hard, is that they may not have been giving you legal testimony, but as you said yourself, it was passionate comments made tonight, which is why this is so difficult to approve. However, recognizing that this building has been abandoned for many years, no one took care of this building, and as Mr. Silverman said, it's not like it's a crown jewel. It was, but it is no longer, okay. Looking at the type of retail looking at the CRA, I can see lots of retail that where residential backs right into it, all along 56th Street. And those neighborhoods have not been ruined by that. Something has to go here, okay? I love the idea that it's a dentist office. Coffee shop might not be so bad, okay? When my sister heard that I had said, oh, what I really want is a restaurant, she was like, are you crazy? I just moved out of, I won't name the neighborhood, because the restaurant played music all night long, and they were parking all up and down. I couldn't get out of my own driveway. I was like, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot why you moved. So this seems to be something that would only have, with the exception of the coffee shop maybe, would have traffic during the day, which you're right, I'm sorry, you're going to have to time between school and getting out for the dentist office. It's been my experience in the last year that all the banks have gone virtual anyway, so I think all the parking is going to be from the dentist office, which, anyway. So, I mean, this is a tough decision, okay? And if my council members go along with me, I'm going to have to bear the brunt of the neighbors who say to me, what were you thinking? I can't believe you voted on this. But if we want something there, we're going to have to give up something. And in this case, you know, Mr. Bullock's building is the exception, okay? We're not going to get that because we've had it for sale, I don't know how many years you said it was, but I know it's been for sale for a long time. So with that's my reasoning for supporting it with the waivers. I would really like to know that when you come back with the site plan, that you've heard all of these comments and that you bring in some bicycle parking and you figure out a way to reduce it down to 36 so that it isn't inconsistent with what's going on in the rest of the CRA. But I know that once we approve this tonight, you've been given the green light. So that's my only, it's a bitter pill, but on the other hand, it's also terrible looking at that vacant building. So.
Councilmember Abel.
I'd like to echo what Councilwoman Donahue said about something needs to go here, and it's sat vacant for so long. However, I don't support the waivers being approved at the same time as the zoning change. And I could only support this motion if it were revised to exclude the exclude the waivers from this motion. Otherwise, I cannot support it.
Councilmember Schistler.
Yes, I gave my second for discussion purposes, and hopefully if I rescind my second, we can start over with this mess or offer a friendly amendment to the motion. But I too have a problem with the waivers. I believe that the usage of this property for the credit union and the subsequent drive-through and everything else, the issues that the setbacks, I think that it's self-created. It creates its own problem, creates its own hardship. Excuse me. I would like to offer an amendment to the motion that we strip off the waivers, approve the zoning, and then that way when we come back, because I have some thoughts. We move the building this way or that way, reconfigure the driveways, that it could possibly be done and possibly fit. And if not, it doesn't work. So it doesn't work. I understand that. I totally understand that. To Mr. Silverman's point, personal property rights gives you the right to sell it, but it doesn't give the right to force something on the rest of the neighborhood that doesn't fit. Okay, so I would request that we modify the motion to strip out the granting of the waivers so that it comes back for site plan review and we can accomplish that as we go through there. Now, I'm saying all that, but at the same token, we have the responsibility to protect the city from litigation. Okay, and I know based upon what Mr. Johnson said that you feel that there's a strong case based on state case law that would say that, yeah, but you can't do it the way you're doing it. And I feel that we're being kind of pigeonholed by putting the waivers on, attaching the waivers, and you have to do all or nothing. And if you do nothing, then you're going against expert testimony given in support of the overall zoning. But I don't think that it's fair that the zoning be attached to, the waivers be attached to the zoning issue. Through the years, I've been very sensitive to putting the city in a position of jeopardy by saying, okay, well, fine, you've now set yourself up for a lawsuit. And nobody wins with that except the attorneys, I'm sorry. But it costs money to defend those suits, irrespective of what the final outcome is. And that's what I object to the most. We're exposing the city to a potential lawsuit by denying the request. So, and that's a lot of gobbledygook. But I still go back to requesting that we modify I withdraw my second so that we can modify the original motion to strip off the waivers and just approve it to a PD zoning classification for that property. And that comes back as a site plan review.
Okay, so now with a withdrawn second, we have no motion on the table to discuss. So is there a motion?
May I ask a question
Of who?
of the petitioner?
That's kind of out of order.
Okay, well,
Is it?
it might be the right question to ask. I won't ask it
Okay.
if we do not approve any waivers, is the real estate deal off the table?
Brad Carnes of Paradise Ventures. So our acquisition of this property is contingent on getting this rezoning approval, which goes hand in hand with the conceptual site plan. And we know we need these waivers, well, whether we get them approved now or later, we're just kicking the can down the
Could you
road.
just answer the question so we can move on? We've heard.
Yes, yes.
So,
The sale's contingent on this approval.
Thank you.
with the waivers?
Yes, ma'am.
Do we have a motion?
I'm prepared to make a motion that we, let's see, approve the first public hearing and reading of the adopted ordinance, approving the zoning reclassification 234 Bullard Parkway minus the waivers. Now, I don't know if we have to reword that or read the ordinance differently.
I think that is a clear motion.
Is that clear? Okay.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Is there discussion on the motion? I have a legal question for the attorney about the motion. I know that on rezoning cases, there's a presumption of approval unless we have substantial and compelling evidence to the contrary. Does that requirement of substantial and compelling evidence does that apply to the waivers as well, or just as zoning?
Did you want to say something? Okay. What I wanted to say is that you can go ahead and vote on the motion just to do the rezoning. You can do a second motion and even 5 more motions and take each one of those waivers separately. You may want to approve one or more of the waivers or none. Obviously the applicant is telling you that they want either all or nothing, but what is before you is the rezoning and the waivers. So you can also give them the opportunity to withdraw their application, and then they have to make that decision. If it'll help at all, I can read you exactly what the criteria is in our land development code for granting waivers. So you can determine whether this criteria is met. I believe I pretty well stated it when the question was asked by Councilwoman Abel, but I'm happy to read the exact wording of our land development code if you want to hear that.
Can you summarize it? I mean, what I'm asking is, what is the rejection rationale for waivers?
And that is, you can use any one of these 5 criteria and say the waiver this particular waiver is not met by this. So
Okay.
this would be our criteria.
Okay, would you please,
It says, waivers to any design guidelines and standards shall only be approved by the city council. A waiver may be granted provided the waiver is consistent with the intent and purpose of this LDC, and the city council finds that, 1, there are extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property in question because of its size, shape, or topography. 2, the application of the provisions of this LDC to the particular piece of property would create an unnecessary hardship. 3, such conditions are peculiar to the particular piece of property involved. 4, relief, if granted, would not cause substantial detriment to the public good or impair the purposes and intent of this LDC. And 5, any waiver granted shall be the minimum waiver which makes possible the reasonable use of the land, building, or property.
Read the last one again.
Any waiver granted shall be the minimum waiver which makes possible the reasonable use of the land, building, or property.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion on the table to approve the rezoning, but not the waivers. I'll make a comment on the.
The applicant would I'm thinking that it seems that they want you to make a vote on the original motion that was proposed or that was made by Councilwoman Donahue. So, again, though.
They don't get to decide that when the second was withdrawn. They don't get to craft the motions.
So, according to our code, the council may deny or approve the application with or without modifications. So they're allowed to approve the application, deny the application, or they can approve it with their modifications. So if you've modified if you're going to approve the rezoning with the modification that the waivers are not included, one or more or none, all, then our code seems to allow you to do that.
Okay, so the motion on the table is to approve the rezoning, but not the waivers, and I have a comment on this motion. I don't know that this project, I don't know if this property can be developed without these waivers or very similar waivers. I really don't. I don't know how you could do this. However, I have the same reservations that I had, a little less, but I have the same reservations that I had the first time we heard this. We have a little more detail on the site renderings, the concept plan, than we had before, so I feel more comfortable a little bit with that. I'm hesitant to approve waivers until we see the site plan, because as Mr. Stevenson pointed out, these waivers attached to the property. Something falls through on this, I don't think it will, but it could. Once these waivers are approved on this property, these waivers are there. And so if we approve the waivers at the time that we see the site plan, which includes the architecture of the building, it includes the rear wall, it includes it includes a lot more detail, I'm not sure that I wouldn't be in favor of these waivers at that time. I have the same discomfort now that I had before. And I understand that the process, they come and they ask for rezoning based on a concept. I'm not sure I hate the concept. I'm just not comfortable granting the waivers until we have the details of the concept. And the comparison to the Riley Auto Parts, in my mind, is not a good comparison and doesn't constitute, in my mind, a precedent. Because in that case, we knew exactly what it was going to look like and where the building was going to be and where the parking was going to be and where the pond was going to, we knew all that when we granted those waivers. And so to me, this is not the same, this is different. It might be the same if we denied the waivers when we had that knowledge, but we don't have that knowledge yet. So I'm inclined to support the motion. I don't have a problem with the rezoning. I'm not even sure I'm gonna have a problem with the waivers at some point. But I'm a little hesitant of writing a blank check on the waivers without the site plan. And then when we get in that, normally at site plan review, we get into that whole, well, what can we do to mitigate the impact to Dr. Salazar? And what can we do to mitigate the impact to, that's when we have those discussions. But when we have those discussions and we've already pre-granted the waivers, they don't have to do anything. We already have a waiver to that. And so I'm in favor of the motion, and I'm not sure I'm not going to be in favor of the project. I just am uncomfortable approving this, which is the same position I had before.
I do want to say one other thing that you need to consider. The owner of the property is the applicant, and I don't know whether the applicant wants the property rezoned without the rest of the package. So that would be something that the owner or the owner's representative should state whether they are comfortable with having it rezoned without the waivers and approval of the whole concept plan. So they may want to just stay right where they are and withdraw the application.
Well, I understand, yeah, right, because now we're rezoning their property, but not
Correct.
approving what, yeah, I
Correct.
understand.
It's different.
Yeah, I
So,
get it.
But it has to be rezoned
That's the whole thing.
to be sold anyway, right?
No,
No? Okay,
no.
just to be
If we
developed.
could get, I don't know how to get to the point I'm trying to get at, because I'm not sure that I don't like this project. I don't know how to get, and I get it, I understand this is a very unique piece of property, and I understand that it probably can't be developed in full conformity with our CRA code. I understand all that. I just want to see exactly, I want the public to be able to see exactly what this thing's going to look like before we say yes.
And before they come back with something, can I?
Yes.
Thank you. I agree with the mayor and the other comments, not so much with Vice Mayor Donahue, but the
Okay.
whole thing. I am not opposed to the rezoning. I am not opposed to the project. I'm probably not opposed to most of the waivers. I am opposed with tying the waivers to the rezoning that puts it in this property forever. So that's just my opinion. You guys can
Well, you
take
just
that.
said in 4 seconds what I took 3
Well,
minutes, so thank you.
Well, that's a good question. Could we approve the rezoning and then immediately approve one or more of the waivers?
No. But I don't know what good that does.
What would be different?
Well, because the rezoning goes with the building. Don't the waivers just go with the project?
That's
Oh,
what
they
we've
don't.
been,
Oh, okay, all
I
right.
don't know.
Sorry, I was trying to work
I'm
something
not
out
even
here.
prepared to do the waivers.
I'm sorry.
I don't know if we're prepared to do the waivers. You know, we need more information.
Well, I think that's the sticking
Yeah,
point. I don't think
it is.
anybody's got any heartburn over the rezoning.
Exactly, exactly.
No, nobody's against that.
they're apparently willing to accept the motion as it is. So,
The motion on the table is to approve the rezoning request without the waivers. Is there any other discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
1 nay. Motion is approved. Now, hold on, I have a question for you. No, go ahead, no.
So was the concept plan approved with that motion?
No.
no, that was just the rezoning.
Okay, hold on, we're losing control here, hold on.
approve the rezoning. So they did not approve, they said minus the waivers. So that's it. They've approved the rezoning. You're representing the owner, who is the applicant.
So I have a question on that. So the property gets rezoned. I know that, I think we've got a great buyer, but at some point, if the waivers aren't approved, this buyer is not able to develop the property. So now I've got a property rezoned for a specific plan that can't be built.
Well,
Okay, we're going to take some of this discussion out of the meeting. I don't think that this is, so, but I do have a question that before I can move on, is because if this ordinance was approved, it somewhat was, it's supposed to appear for a second reading and the second public hearing on Tuesday, December the 21st. And that I don't know what to do with, because if we don't want to do that, that's fine, but then we get into re-advertising another date. So I don't know what the applicant wants to do with that.
And that was the question, was did the applicant want this property rezoned only? Were they willing to accept just that?
Well, you asked that question
right.
prior to the vote.
And I don't know that.
What was approved, because we submitted.
Well, I read it 3 times before we voted on it, and
It was a separation of the waivers and the concept plan, but I don't know that they can be separated because they go hand in hand, so I'm confused as to what approval we have.
No, they didn't.
We had detailed justification, sorry. We provided detailed justification on every single waiver request per that hardship criteria, and Ty went on over all of that. We came here tonight we've been very transparent of what we're trying to achieve. It's like,
okay, you don't get to start this all over again. Okay? There's been a motion.
right,
The rezoning request has been approved on first reading without the waivers. If you wish, okay, we have too many conversations going on, so.
That the problem is that too many people are talking.
I know.
We didn't get an answer, and apparently they didn't hear the motion. So if we could go back, and if the clerk would please read the motion, we at least will first know what we're talking about.
The motion was without the waiver. So basically, for the rezoning reclassification of 234 Bullard Parkway for RZP 2102, it did not include the 5 waivers.
Okay.
And this is on the first reading.
Okay, and being that the owner is the applicant and not the developer, and I don't know if Mr. Hudson's also representing the owner, but okay. So the question would be, did the owner, you went ahead and voted, but did the owner want the rezoning regardless? If the owner did not want the rezoning without this whole concept plan, waivers included, then they had an opportunity to withdraw the whole application or ask that you vote on it as a total, and you can either vote yes or you vote no. That's why I said they seem to be wanting a vote on the original motion.
Yeah, but our code gives us the ability to do what we did. And so if they don't want to rezone, there still has to be a second hearing. So it's not officially rezoned. If they decide that they don't want this rezoned to PD, it's not rezoned until the second hearing.
So at that point, they need to come in and state whether they want it rezoned or they don't want it rezoned without that concept plan.
Yes. And that's a decision that you guys have to make, because I don't know. In my mind, chances are good if you brought a site plan in that you might get, I don't know. I can't say that for sure. But I think our discomfort, as I've said several times, is doing it without the site plan.
Council, I'm only here to ask a clarifying question, is whether the conceptual site plan, without waivers, but that picture, which is part of our application, and it's something that we made clear to staff, was part of our submittal for tonight, landscape exhibit, a text list of waivers, and the conceptual site plan. Was the conceptual site plan alone a part of your motion, because if it wasn't, I'm not sure what the content of the motion could be, since a PD site plan is a site plan controlled zoning district. So it's a clarifying question perhaps for the clerk, but a PD can only be approved if there is some exhibit to it. It's not a Euclidean zoning district like CG that speaks for itself. So
Well,
my
then I
point
would,
of clarification is
then
whether,
I would say, from a layperson's perspective, no, your concept plan was not approved because, as you put it, that's a picture of the waivers. And we didn't approve the waivers. Councilmember Abel.
And specifically, I think the ordinance for item F on the agenda doesn't say anything about the concept plan. All it says is the rezoning and the waivers. And we just said, okay, that, but without the waivers, right?
Right. I mean, that's it. Essentially, if it wasn't done like this, the concept plan would be approved along with the rezoning. Their contention is that this concept can't even exist without the waivers. The concept is the waivers, and the waivers is the concept. I don't know what else to tell you about that. I mean, you've denied it. You have not approved the waivers.
No, we have
So-
not. And perhaps we're working too hard trying to give them a way to make this project work, and we should have just disapproved it all. We're trying very hard to give them a way to try to make this work. Bring us a site plan. We didn't say we hated this project. Nobody did. And maybe we're working too hard to give you a way to make it work. Maybe we should have just said no. And now I'm getting a little sorry that we didn't. Councilmember Chambers.
I think of our planning staff, can I ask a question of planning staff?
Certainly.
About the concept plan?
Certainly.
Concept plan's a concept. It doesn't have dimensions, it doesn't have anything. It shows that there's trees, landscaping and stuff. It's a concept. It doesn't have anything to do with waivers. It doesn't have anything to do with the number of spaces. It's a concept of building, parking lot, retention, landscaping. Correct?
Correct. And, again, this project is going to have to come before council again for the site plan review, which is going to show all those details. This rezoning, if it comes with a concept plan, like Councilman Chambers says, it's a concept. All these details can be ironed out during the site plan review.
Okay.
Well, you could have had a piece of paper with a box score drawn on it, with.
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Schoen, we need to land this plane. So what do we need to do tonight to,
I don't think that there's anything more for you to do tonight. Unless the applicant proposes that they want some other motion made, you've made your decision on this application.
all right. Okay. Thank you very much. Is there carryover council business from, I'm sorry.
So is this going forward on the 21st?
Oh, well, I don't know. I didn't get an answer to that. Is this appearing for I'll tell you what, let's do. If approved, this ordinance will appear for a second reading and public hearing on Tuesday, December the 21st. If they require an extension or want to withdraw, we can change that. But that way, we have it set right now for December the 21st.
Right.
Right. So it will be set right now for December 21st. Thank you. Is there carryover council business from previous meetings? You forgot. You want a minute to think about it? Carryover council business. Okay. We do have some new business, and I have promised Councilmember Schistler that he can go first.
About 3 weeks ago, Hart had a State of the Heart meeting downtown at a very nice hotel called the Hyatt Hotel in Ybor City. I recommend you go there, but it was they made an internal video, and I'd like to show it to council tonight. That it was all done internally, written, produced, actors, everybody was internal, so there was very little money spent on it. But I'd like the council to see it, and I think Brian has it queued up. I'm not sure, but I'd also like this to be put on our public information channel too, so that our citizens can see it as to what, you know, what's Hart doing, what's Hart about. And if you could go ahead and run that, Brian.
It can be easy to think it doesn't look like much where you are now. Everyday Hart delivers public transit to count on. 15,003 miles, 34 routes, 47,715 turns, 2,583 stops, 351 bikes, 71,981 shoes, 615 rides to school. But it's usually the smaller numbers we notice. The 10 seconds it always takes Gary to realize he missed his stop. The 4 days a week Jen and Chandra laugh their way to Dad's for lunch. The 2 years Sam has been working the late shift while studying for his dream job. Those numbers mean lives and hopes. Birthday parties, retirements, weekly hangouts and first dates. Vacations. Another round of chemo. It can be easy to think it doesn't look like much where you are now. But look at what you've already accomplished. And if you hadn't taken that step every day for 2 years, you wouldn't be here today. No one knows what awaits in your future. The dream wants you there. Strength gets you there. Purpose keeps you there. Heart takes you there.
Thank you. Just to bring everybody else up to speed on another issue with Hart, they've extended the 48 route to include Amazon, which it's a reroute. They actually had to change the route to make it work, and then they're going to also pick up when the VA opens up. So all that'll will come into play. I know there's some people in the community have always said, you know, what do we get from Hart? And I think that presentation, it's not just us, it's the whole community. Because we have people who work in Temple Terrace and live in it and take the 6 bus or the 36 or the 48, and that's how they get to work, or that's how they get home. That's how they go to school. So Hart does lots of good for the whole community, both internal and external. And I just wanted to bring that forward to
Thank you.
council. Thank you.
Very good video. Thank you. Anything else, Councilmember?
Nope.
Councilmember Chambers.
Thank you, Mayor. This last couple days, we've had 2 great events in Temple Terrace. Saturday night was Winter Wonderland, and preceding Winter Wonderland was our golf cart parade starting at the Family Recreation Complex and winding through the city. And I know from talking to Parks and Rec staff, there were 72 carts registered. That's a lot of carts. We also had some that kind of came in at the last minute, and we had some that dropped out at during the got there. But anyway, to go through the city at a slower speed, to see all the residents along the roads and the parks was really neat. But to get down to Woodmont Park at the very end of the parade and see all the children and all the adults having fun, the ice slide, all that was really great to see. And I really want to thank the city staff. I've said it before with the Arts Festival, Leisure Services staff goes up above and beyond. They did it again. It was well done. Police Department, a great job with the escort in the front and the back of the parade. Again, I'm just always amazed at how our city staff, and I shouldn't be amazed, they're great all the time. The second event we had, I attended last night, the candlelight lighting for the Angel of Hope. That's done on December 6th. And I've done that. I helped get that park and Angel started. But one person has been there, a city staff member was there last night, and has been there every time, even though he doesn't need to be, and that's Carl Langfeld, Director Langfeld. He did it he does it by himself. They bring chairs, help with the PA, help the people set up, and I want to thank Mr. Langfeld for that. he does it every year. That's a great, great event. That was it.
Good. Other new business, council members, vice mayor? I want to echo some of that. Charles, your staff always outdoes themselves, and the Winter Wonderland, the golf cart parade was outstanding. So thank you for that.
They do a wonderful job for us.
Yeah, well,
They really do.
And you don't want to be behind the last of the cop car, bringing up to the end because it just blow your eyes out. God, those.
city manager's report.
Mr. Mayor, all I have to do is echo Mr. Chambers and your comments about our staff. That leisure services, the sanitation crews hop in and help out. Things are left like events never happened. So they do work hard, and we appreciate you noticing. And certainly we'll make sure that Carl didn't want to stay for this meeting, and I told him he can go home and watch it on TV. But thank you, Carl.
Is that
And
an option
leisure
for us too?
That's why I didn't have anything else to say.
City attorney report?
Nothing tonight.
Okay, anything, council members, anybody? Everything good? Very good, then we will be adjourned, thank you.